Ladies and gents, boys and girls, welcome. Wednesday, August the 9th, 2023. Hope you're all doing well. Chris Phillips here, your host of the Daily Crow of the Spurs Up Show. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. We got a jam-packed show, lot to get into here on this Wednesday. And again, guys, as I just mentioned, I appreciate each and every single one of you. Hope you're having a fantastic week, by the way, as we continue to count down the days to kick off. And I mentioned this morning in the Big Cock Club Discord. It feels like we are getting to that point. I've mentioned this previously, right? We're getting to that point where we all sort of hit a wall in the preseason where it's like, and I'll say this, like I'm still excited, of course. We continue along the position unit preview series. We're going to get into defense starting tomorrow. And so that's a lot of fun. But we hit a wall where we've been in the midst of talking season since literally the beginning of July. And it gets to a point, you get around 3 weeks away from kickoff or so, and it's like, man, I'm just ready for ball, man. I'm just ready for toe to meet leather, man. Like, I'm tired of counting down the days. We're tired of projecting and previewing and breaking it down and, whatever. We're tired of it. We're just so ready for kickoff. But do not fret. Yours truly, I'm here to get you through the rest of the offseason, guys. And you guys do actually the same for me. So, again, appreciate you all. I see Ben DeRosa, Steven, my brother, Travi, Will, Cody, Chase Floyd, Alex Mitchum, GA, Jeff Gullidge, Brennan M. What is going on? Appreciate each and every single one of you. Also, those in the Big Cock Club Discord. Head over to the TDC Questions channel, the TDC Questions channel, to be sure that your questions are answered there. Really excited, guys. Again, we got a jam-packed show today. Hour number 3, of course, our Q&A Power Hour. We'll take your questions, your comments, your calls at 843-790-3377. If you do want to call that number, leave a voicemail, but you can't do so in the third hour, give us a ring right now. We'll play your voicemail in that third hour once we get into that Q&A session. In hour number 2, we have my good friend Chris Marler, Saturday Down South, Saturday Football Uncensored, his first appearance as a weekly guest on TDC. So we'll talk all things Gamecocks, SEC, college football as a whole with our good friend Chris Marler. That coming up at 1:15. And kicking off the show today, we've got Connor O'Gara of Saturday Down South, an SDS heavy show today. That was sort of by accident. But Connor O'Gara kicking things off. Then, of course, guys, later in the show, later in this first hour, we will conclude our conversations regarding the Gamecocks offensive line, talking season will be successful if, and I'll lock in my overall grade for the Gamecocks offensive line heading into the 2023 football season. And, of course, guys, like I mentioned, tomorrow we begin talking about Gamecocks defensive line. We'll dive into defense. Then next week we'll get into linebackers. We'll get into secondary. And then finally, late next week, we'll conclude the position unit preview series, talking South Carolina's kickers and punters, the specialists, which, of course, will be a really fun show. JC Sherbert, guys, moved to tomorrow. JC's still dealing with some travel issues, travel things going on. So we will have back-to-back guests tomorrow, 1:15 Mark Ryan, 1:45 JC Sherbert. So we'll hit you back-to-back. Going to be a lot of fun, guys. In the meantime, as I mentioned, we're kicking this show off today. My good friend Connor O'Gara, Saturday Down South, does a fantastic job. Had the pleasure of meeting him at SEC Media Days in Nashville, Tennessee. Does a fantastic job talking all things SEC football. And again, he joined us this morning to talk SEC ball, Gamecocks, of course, college football as a whole. Sit back, relax, enjoy this conversation with our good friend Connor O'Gara of Saturday Down South. As we sit just over 3 weeks until toe meets leather on the 2023 college football season, we chat with a dear friend of mine, someone I was lucky enough to meet for the first time in person at SEC Media Days in Nashville. He's a senior national columnist for Saturday Down South, the host of the SDS podcast. Connor O'Gara joins the show. Connor, appreciate you taking the time, my friend. It is a pleasure to have you on. What's going on?
Yeah, good to be here. It was great to be able to meet you in person. I found it weird. I was like, gosh, I guess I hadn't met you in person. I think it's just because I see the videos all the time. The algorithm just favors your stuff on social media, and I'm getting hit up on. I mean, I follow you guys on Instagram and all that stuff, and I follow all your content. But like, I had felt like I had met you plenty of times, obviously because coming on the show and stuff. But yeah, it was great to be able to meet you, spend some time with you at your first SEC media days. It was a fun week in Nashville that we got to have.
And getting to experience the days with you, Connor, that truly was the highlight of my week. I just want to let you know. And by the way, congrats to you on the major success. The Dan Mullen interview was incredible. I know you guys have some other big ones
Appreciate that.
with the SDS podcast. Let's start, though. You had a really, really big day on Thursday when Shane Beamer spoke at SEC Media Days. You basically hung out with him all day long, documented all of your takeaways. You got a great piece out right now, which I highly suggest people go check out. But going back to that day, was there anything in particular that stood out to you? Again, I'm sure you got a much closer view than anyone else did. And of course, when you talk about Shane Beamer at the podium, charismatic, full of energy, the media loves this guy. Like, he's built for events like SEC Media Days, and you can see the comfort factor from year one to now. Like, he just really embraces it. But was there anything specifically that maybe surprised you, or just main takeaways from your day you spent with Shane Beamer in Nashville?
I think there are certain people who don't like Shane Beamer, and he rubs them the wrong way because they feel like he is much, and they feel like he's maybe over the top, or that he's not genuine, and that this is all just some big image that he's putting out there, and this isn't who he really is. And I think what you see is what you get with Shane Beamer. And I think that you see the way that he interacts not only with the media, which obviously, like, he understands that side of it to a level that I'm not sure a lot of coaches in this sport really do. And the impact that Justin King has had on this program is second to none. And being able to try and show that this can be a fun place to play football, and the way that is conveyed, I think South Carolina does as good a job at that as anybody in college football. But I think with Shane Beamer, one of the things that people wonder about is like, okay, what's it going to look like when that honeymoon phase is over? Because it looked like that honeymoon phase was over when 38-6 happens in the Florida game and everything that happened there. And then, of course, the two games that followed changed perhaps his entire trajectory at South Carolina. And it certainly changed his trajectory going into year three. And he gets asked about that literally every place he goes to, like every single place. It's Clemson, it's Tennessee, it's what did that do for the momentum of the program? I think he understands that it was great for the offseason. It's great to go into those booster events and say, hey, we showed that we could beat top 10 teams. We can do this, this, and this, helps on the recruiting trail, all those things. He's kind of like, look, I can be gone if I don't win football games. Like, none of this is going to matter. People will forget about this if I'm not good at my job. And I think there are people who think that he is not necessarily 100% genuine just because, oh, maybe he's a little bit more media savvy or something like that. I didn't get that impression at all. And I came away thinking even better things about Shane Beamer, and I can totally understand why people like playing for him.
Connor, I know Shane Beamer is somewhat tired of being asked about it, and I'm going to ask you as well, because obviously, we're just a couple weeks away from the start of the 2023 season, but I'm not sure you and I have spoken since the end of last season. Just how astonishing was that to watch South Carolina go from being, by all accounts, dead as a football team after the Florida game to what they did in the final 2 weeks of the regular season? And then, it's a crapshoot in the bowl game. Half your team's opting out, basically. But the final 2 weeks of that regular season, Connor, I mean, I look back, I still look at that Tennessee game in amazement. Like, I was there in person that night. I still can't believe what happened. Just 7 days later, South Carolina to lose by 32 in the Swamp and then beat the brakes off a Tennessee team that was destined for the playoff. I mean, it's one of the more astonishing 7-day turnarounds I've ever seen for a college football team make.
Ever. I mean, truly ever. And I remember watching SEC Nation that morning. I included this in the story that I wrote about Beamer. And I remember watching Marty Smith try and pump up the crowd in Columbia, and it was dead. I mean, South Carolina
I was there.
fans,
I can attest. It was dead. Yeah.
it like totally, like nothing was going to get that crowd fired up. It looked like a chilly morning in Columbia, which I know is the hottest place on earth, as my colleague Chris Marler always brings up. But it looked pretty bad. And I totally get why. Like, you just got whooped 38-6 by a Florida team that's going nowhere. And you feel like your team, yeah, you've already clinched bowl eligibility. Like, what are you really playing for at that point, other than pride, when you're a 3-touchdown underdog? And even South Carolina fans, who are as loyal as it gets. And I always say to people, you can get that team coming off a 3-win season and they're still going to show up the next year like blasting sandstorm, and they're going to be going nuts. And that's what makes South Carolina and such an integral part of the SEC and its identity. But man, that atmosphere was not conducive to coming back and winning that game. I shouldn't say coming back, because obviously they were never trailing in that game, but bouncing back the way that they did to win that football game. It speaks to Beamer, though, and it speaks to his personality, because a lot of coaches in this day and age, I think, have a tough time keeping their team locked in and focused, especially when you're out of the race. You're not going to be playing for a conference championship anymore. There are more distractions than ever with NIL, with the transfer portal, with tampering, and all these different things. And I don't think it should be forgotten, even if the Beamer era doesn't turn out to be some unbelievable success, that he had that 2-week stretch with a team that was totally locked in, and guys who weren't necessarily having the years that they hoped, a Xavier Legette, a Josh Van, these guys who you'd kind of written off. You're like, they were kind of disappointments. And the impact that those guys made down the stretch, you're just like, this is rare. And it felt astonishing, because we're not used to seeing someone pull out a moment like that. And South Carolina had 2 weeks that I think Gamecock fans should appreciate forever.
Connor, a big part of that, Spencer Rattler, his performance down the stretch was something that, again, nobody saw coming, right? 6 touchdowns against Tennessee. He had the heroics against Clemson, the way that he personally was able to bounce back and overcome a pick 6 early in that game, a terrible interception in the end zone. That game, I felt like, Connor, that defined who and what Spencer Rattler is. Like, you got to live with that bad to get all the good he provides, aka a 72-yard touchdown pass to Juice Wells, puts his shoulder down, gets in the end zone, if you will. So now we turn to this year. And while there were question marks and there was a mixed bag of feelings about Spencer Rattler going into last season, I feel like there might even be more of that going into this year, because you saw this guy in those last 3 weeks be one of the best quarterbacks in college football, but you can't forget about the first 10 games in which he was just flat out abysmal. Let's call it for what it is. When you look at Spencer Rattler's game, I know it goes far beyond him. We got to talk offensive line, receivers, tight ends, running game, weapons to help him. But, like, what do you see? How do you view his game, and what are you expecting from Spencer Rattler this year?
It's interesting that last year he had the struggles that he did, I thought, throughout the first 2 months really of the season, where we're kind of like, yeah, this is the reason why this guy got benched at Oklahoma. I would point to the fact that Caleb Williams was really, really good, and Oklahoma fans had a different standard of what their quarterback was compared to anywhere else in the country outside of maybe Alabama. And that definitely led to his early benching, when you kind of look back at some of his numbers at Oklahoma and you're just like, oh, this guy wasn't as bad as people realize. But people nationally want to hate Spencer Rattler because of the Netflix show, and they want to continue to paint this picture of him that, look, I got an impression of him at media days internally from them that is just so different than what the outside world sees. And there's a reason why, as Shane Beamer referenced many times throughout his day in Nashville, this guy was voted a captain when he decided to come back for that 5th season of college football. And I think that you have to accept the good with the bad. He's never going to be a mistake-free quarterback. He's just not. Like, even if you look at some of the throws that he made against Clemson, against Notre Dame, those mistakes are going to be there. You just have to accept that. If you're the person that is anti-Rattler, you'll jump on those moments and say, this is why this kid just is never going to fully get it. I think you have to look at him a little bit like he's Jay Cutler. Okay. Like, that's the comp I've been making for a while for him. And it's interesting now that his coordinator is Dowell Loggins, who Dowell Loggins is somebody that Jay Cutler went to bat for, and was like, this guy was somebody that I found great success with the Chicago Bears, and had his best statistical season in 2015, when he was, of course, the Bears quarterbacks coach. And I think you have to take the good with the bad with him. I don't think it's realistic to think that he turned the corner based on what he did in those 2 games to lead South Carolina to those victories. But I do think that you should expect more great moments from him. I think he does things that you just can't teach. Like, you just can't teach some of the throws that he makes. I hope the offense is a little bit more simplified. I think we get better moments from him and Juice Wells this year early on, as opposed to just kind of the Arkansas game or just the Vandy game like we had last year. And we see this guy take another step, and maybe he's not an all SEC quarterback, but is he going to be one of the better quarterbacks in this conference? I believe he will be.
Connor, Juice Wells is a great place to start, as you mentioned, in the passing game. I know Trey Knox, the guy. You've made me look really smart, by the way, with your statistic. I think I've mentioned that about 10 different times now about Trey Knox, no touchdowns against Power 5 competition since October of 2021. I would expect that to change rather quickly, by the way. Let's talk running game specifically, though, and not just the offensive side. It is, it's not the sexiest thing to talk about, line of scrimmage, offensive line, defensive line, but you know as well as I do, Connor, it's what this league is built off of. If you can't run the ball, you can't stop the run, you're going to have trouble winning football games. And for whatever reason, South Carolina last year, finishing outside of the top 100 nationally, running the ball and stopping the run. When you factor that in, Connor, the fact the Gamecocks won 8 games, and oh, by the way, Shane Beamer pointed this out at Media Days, they led the SEC in turnovers. They were the worst at turning it over, couldn't stop the run, couldn't run the ball. They won 8 games anyways. It's just wild to me, and that's probably my biggest question mark, Connor, for this football team is, do they improve in those areas? I don't have unrealistic expectations when it comes to generating a run game with the running back position being what it is, although they feel confident in it. But I think you have to have realistic expectations, losing Marshawn Lloyd, DeCarrion Joyner's now having to shoulder that load and the rest of that room as well. And then the defensive front, I mean, you lose Zach Pickens, you lose Jordan Birch off the edge. How much can you improve there? But if they can just make slight improvements in those areas, I mean, what this means for this, or what that means for this football team is immeasurable. Just talk about the struggles there, I guess, in running the ball, stopping the run for South Carolina. I guess how they're able to overcome it.
Haven't ranked in the top 90 in either of those two categories, running the football or defending the run, in the first 2 years of the Shane Beamer era. And the turnover stat, yeah, like it's pretty amazing to think that they have won 7 games as an underdog. They've won 4 games as a double-digit underdog, all of which came in the month of November or later. I mean, that is truly remarkable. That's finding other ways to win. That's Beamer ball. I know that. Well, I don't know if I got to pay you a royalty for saying that or whatever, but look, I think that there are different ways for South Carolina to be able to win football games, and obviously special teams is a big part of that. When you can force turnovers the way that they have, that's huge. But they need to flirt with mediocrity. They need to flirt with mediocrity to be a more consistent team. I think that's the biggest thing that Shane Beamer wants to see this year is week-to-week consistency. It shouldn't be, oh man, like you look as bad as they did against Florida, and then a week later you put together a game that was like a game in which you're simply untouchable. I mean, on the offensive side, like their only touchdown the week before was a punt, a fake punt. I mean, that's like, of course, South Carolina would have a lone touchdown in a game like that on a fake punt. But yeah, I mean, I think that you need to get better in that area. And there's a lot of pressure on this very atypical running back room that they have. And DeCarrion Joyner leading the way as someone who has meant so much to that program. I'll sing that guy's praises forever with his loyalty and his willingness to play a variety of positions for that program. To me is like, that's the type of stuff that we need to be talking about in college football. But I do think it's a massive question mark in losing Marshawn Lloyd, someone who I thought was going to be at this point of his career representing South Carolina at SEC Media Days. And instead he's off to the other USC and could have success there playing behind Caleb Williams. But yeah, man, it needs to improve. You need to be able to flirt with mediocrity. If you're going to be as bad as they've been, you're not going to be a consistent team in this league. They have to establish that part of their game one way or another.
Now, Connor, on the defensive side, I mentioned that front 7. You do get Jordan Strawn and Mo Kaba back from injury at the defensive end and linebacker position, respectively. But the secondary, really, South Carolina's bread and butter, has been the first 2 years. Same, expected to be the same yet again this year. Losing Cam Smith and Darius Rush to the NFL hurts, but Marcellus Dial, who led them in interceptions last year, he slides into that number 1 corner spot. And then O'Donnell Fortune, the other corner, who had a 100-yard pick 6 in that bowl game against Notre Dame. Then, of course, 2 of the best safeties in the SEC, Nicky Manwari, DQ Smith. It still blows my mind. Nicky Manwari was not on a preseason All-SEC team, but that's neither here nor there. When you look at South Carolina defensively, being opportunistic is what they've made a living on. And it's not something we're kind of like, I'm taking away. Like it's, people will label turnovers as luck, but to a degree, it is right place, right time, although it's also coaching, skill, talent, whatever. So you look at this defense, of course, slowing down the run is the key. What other things do you like? What are you most intrigued to see from this South Carolina defense this season? And I think what's interesting, Connor, is you have to factor in, you're breaking in 2 new corners. The way you start the season against Drake May and UNC, they're going to throw the ball over the yard. Carson Beck in Georgia and that crop of receivers. You got Will Rogers in Mississippi State. I know they're not air raid anymore, but it's still Will Rogers. And then Joe Milton in Tennessee. It's no secret there. So, while the secondary is the strength, in my opinion, Connor, that's going to be the unit that's tested more than any because you've really got some big-time quarterbacks, some high-flying offenses, and you can't afford to get off to a slow start.
Yeah, they've been really good against the pass. I mean, they have been in all the turnovers forced. I mean, they were locked down corners like that people probably don't realize nationally that South Carolina has had these last few years. And that position has just been like one of the things that you could just rely on, and having that number one guy. And what does that look like this year? Do they have that number one guy? Yeah, the Nick Eamon thing, it baffles me. It truly baffles me. I had him as a first team guy in the SEC, and I think that people overlooked the fact that he led all FBS freshmen in solo stops. He had 62 of those last year, and at his size, I think they're going to continue to add more to his plate and what he's capable of. And he's not going to be considered, I mean, he's not considered like a safety, I guess, or whatever with the way that he plays, and him playing closer to the line of scrimmage maybe is going to be a way that you can kind of answer some of those questions on the defensive line that they have. But you have to be able to establish those lockdown corners, and South Carolina has had that. And having someone like Cam Smith, who you just know, like you see the game that he has against Jalen Hyatt, like that guy just is not scared. Even though Jalen Hyatt like made a couple of plays in that game, and I remember talking to Cam Smith about this during the pre-draft process. He's just like, yeah, I was going to make sure he wasn't going to get anything yak. I was going to be jawing back and forth, and I knew that I was going to be in a matchup unlike any I had all year because Jalen Hyatt played mostly out of the slot, and he was just pretty much going to be shadowing him all game. Do you have that dog? Do you have that dog on your defense? You need to find him, because if not, you're right. That first part of the schedule can really expose you, and that's an issue that could plague South Carolina and could prevent them from feeling like they have any sort of SEC East chance, by mid-October.
Connor, how entertaining is it? Or, there are many adjectives you can use in regards to Beamer ball. And so you're watching South Carolina on a week in, week out basis. And you're like, okay, I know about Beamer ball. They're using it to win games, but at some point, coaches are going to make adjustments. They're going to catch up. They're going to be able to neutralize special teams. And this isn't going to be a facet of the game that South Carolina is able to steal. Just like, what are your thoughts watching this? It's just like a week in, week out basis. They are just able to find ways, whether it's Kai Kroger throwing a touchdown pass, it's a blocked punt, it's a blocked field goal. You look at the Clemson game, it's Clemson fumbling a kickoff. It's Kai Kroger having the game of his life, pinning them inside the 5-yard line multiple times. I mean, when you speak on Beamer ball, and I know it's something where we'll see this year if they can continue to sustain that, but I mean, the fact that South Carolina, you talk about winning 7 of 15 games, 7 of Shane Beamer's 15 wins, they've been an underdog. I got to believe a large piece of that is because they're able to steal that facet of the game that is special teams. Your thoughts just on the impact that Beamer ball has had thus far for South Carolina and what it's meant for them.
Yeah, I listened to Shane describe Beamer ball, and I think a lot of us largely associated with special teams because yeah, it does feel like a very special teams centric thing. We know that Shane was a special teams coordinator. And if you ask him about not being a coordinator at the FBS level, he'll remind you he was indeed a special teams coordinator. That's something that he takes a lot of pride in, and understandably so, because it's been such a big part of his family's coaching legacy. And I think that hearing him describe Beamer ball as no matter who's on the field for your team, you have the ability to score points. That's what this comes down to. Find unique ways to be able to score. And that's having guys who truly buy into that side of the ball. Like, I don't think you can create that. I don't think that's as simple as, oh, we're going to practice special teams and everybody's going to celebrate if we do this, this, or this. I think that's somebody who understands really what goes into that process and knowing that you need full buy-in. This can't be as simple as like, oh, this, there are a few guys who really get into it in practice and are really obsessed with, oh, this punt or being able to return this, this interception for a touchdown. Like, you have to have that culture established. And Shane Beamer absolutely does. That'll never be a question. What does it look like if they actually miss a kick this year? What does it look like if they don't necessarily have a kickoff return for a touchdown to open a big game like Texas A&M? Like, what do those moments look like if that isn't there, if that isn't relied on? I don't even know if we could say that, because that's just been such a constant, and it keeps guys dialed in, man. Like late in the season, when you have that type of coach who understands the ways that you need to be able to, it's like manufacturing runs in baseball. It's like you're manufacturing points in football and finding unique ways to do that. That has been a specialty of this team, and it's fun to watch. And you just kind of expect it at this point. You just kind of expect to see South Carolina is going to find a unique way. I think they would rather have more rushing touchdowns. I think they would rather have more big plays to Juice Wells and this receiving group. I think they would much rather see like conventional ways to score, but I think that they'll take that all day. And you just assume that it's going to be a staple of this program.
Connor, year 3 is one that, is talked about as being really important for coaches, that, if they're going to pop, year 3 is the year they have to make that big jump. Would you agree or disagree? And what do you feel like that looks like for South Carolina? I'm someone that I think the goal this year for the Gamecocks in year 3 of Shane Beamer, when you factor in the question marks and the schedule, by the way, I think getting back to 8 wins would be a massive achievement. Anything more than that is gravy, and Beamer should be in conversation for coach of the year. I even think at 7-5, Connor, like you mentioned, if you show more consistency and you're able to make it a fight with Georgia and not have those head-scratching losses like 38-6 to Florida, or just laying an egg against the Missouri Tigers, even if you go 7-5, I think you could look at that season as, okay, we laid more building blocks for what we're doing here in Columbia. Your just overall thoughts on that? I mean, is there a way that you define success for the Gamecocks in 2023?
Yeah, I don't think all 7-win seasons are created equally. I think that there are certain things that South Carolina needs to be able to do, a couple of which you just hit on, being more competitive against Georgia so that it's not just Georgia and everyone else in the SEC East, which it is until further notice, but having those moments in which you're not really questioning how low the floor is. I think that's the biggest thing that they want to establish this year. You got to end the Mizzou streak. That is so important. I don't think the average fan realizes that it's a 4-game losing streak to Mizzou and how quickly that needs to be turned around. But like, in addition to that, avoiding those just absolute dud performances. It's great that you've had the 2 top 10 wins, the 4 wins as double-digit underdog, but being able to show that you can be a more steady, hey, we're going to be at least somewhat near the top of the SEC East standings. I think establishing that this year is huge. And you can do that going 8-4. You can do that by not necessarily, even if you don't beat Tennessee for a second consecutive year, even if you don't, stay within a touchdown of Georgia, you can do these things that I think make you feel good about year 3 of the Shane Beamer era. I think the stat that I looked up earlier, it's like 80% of coaches who appear in their first SEC championship game have done so by the end of year 3. And it's really, really rare to see someone do that post year 3. Now, of course, one of those examples is Spurrier, obviously at South Carolina, but it is one of those rare things. And I don't know that we're talking about SEC championships anytime soon for South Carolina. That doesn't seem realistic this year, obviously. But to establish that floor, that's the biggest thing. You got to avoid those duds. You can't have moments in which you're like, man, I don't know when our next win is coming. And when you look at that schedule, I think being able to avoid those duds and look more like a contender against those quality opponents on your schedule, that's the biggest thing for the Gamecocks this year.
So, Connor, let's zoom out and look at the entire SEC East. I think it's safe to say Georgia at number 1. That's not a hot take, like you mentioned, until proven otherwise. Back-to-back national champions. They're favored to do it yet again. Vandy in the 7 spot, although we could have an argument because of what the Florida Gators may be this year. 2 through 6, though, is kind of just wide open, anybody's game. Where do you see South Carolina fitting in, and how do you see that shaking out in the SEC East?
I have them second. And look, I think I told you that like Monday of SEC Media Days. You're like, really? Okay, didn't know that. Yeah. You can poke holes in every single East team, and I will right now. Kentucky, could it be one of those years? Maybe. Look at the last 5 games of that schedule and tell me that that team is going better than 2-3 in that stretch, a stretch which includes home games against Alabama and Tennessee, includes road games against 3 teams that won at least 8 games last year, Mississippi State, South Carolina, Louisville. That's a really, really difficult schedule to end with for a team that we're kind of questioning their depth and what that's going to look like. Tennessee, you mean to tell me that Tennessee is just going to pick up where it left off and have another 10-win season, which was their best season in 19 years after losing their best quarterback of the post-Peyton Manning era, losing a Biletnikoff Award winner in Jalen Hyatt, losing a day 2 receiver in Cedric Tillman, a top 10 overall pick in Darnell Wright. I don't think that Josh Heupel, as great of an offensive mind as he is just going to pick up where that team left off with a guy who in year 6 has yet to hold down a starting job in Joe Milton. So I don't think Tennessee is at that level just yet. South Carolina, all the issues that we have already outlined and all the questions that we have asked about this team, and yet they have still found ways to win football games and win football games late when seemingly nothing is there to play for. And that's the biggest thing that I come back to is, yeah, I think that they have issues in the trenches and that could prevent them from really looking like a true top 25 team for the entirety of this season. But do I think Spencer Rattler is going to get better with Dowell Loggins? I do. Do I think Juice Wells is one of the best receivers in all of college football? A guy who led the SEC in catches in receiving yards in the second half of games last year. I think he's like top 3 in FBS in that category. Yes, I do. I think he gets better. Do I think this running game put together with a little bit of Scotch tape finds a way to stay afloat? Yes, I do. And do I think Beamer ball still exists for this team? And do I think they have a potential to have a couple of all SEC guys on that defense? I absolutely do. So you could poke holes in South Carolina all day, but give me the team that has risen above those expectations. It has shown that it can overcome those weaknesses the way that South Carolina has, a team that's extremely well coached, which we know to be the case. And I'll put my chips on that team as opposed to any other in the East. And you'll notice that I didn't mention Florida. Probably not good when you're going into a season with maybe the 14th ranked quarterback in the SEC and Graham Mertz. So yeah, that's kind of where I stand with South Carolina, second in the East. Maybe that'll come back to bite me. And look, I'll admit, last time I followed a coach at SEC Media Days was Joe Moorhead, 2019. Joe Moorhead was fired at the end of year 2. Didn't exactly work out for my guy. So if I end up, being the beginning of Shane Beamer getting fired at the end of year 3, I will never follow a coach again. I will be the true kiss of death.
The kiss of death, indeed. Connor O'Gara says Gamecocks second in the SEC East. Connor, let's jump to the SEC West for fun. Who was your pick to take the West? Of course, between Bama, LSU, Texas A&M might have something to say as well in regards to, making some noise and ruining somebody's hopes and dreams. We know they have the talent. Will the Jimbo Fisher, Bobby Petrino thing work? You've now got Hugh Freeze at Auburn. Of course, KJ Jefferson, who I know you love. You guys had on the show. He's at Arkansas with Rocket Sanders. Of course, Ole Miss and what Lane Kiffin do. It gives everybody headaches. And then Zach Arnett at Mississippi State, a really intriguing year 1. I think State might even be being slept on a little bit when you have Will Rogers at quarterback and that pair of fantastic linebackers they have. How do you shake out the SEC West? And I think most importantly at the top, is it LSU or is it Alabama?
Bama. And I admit there are fewer questions with LSU, the defending West champs. Have your quarterback situation figured out. You have the one of 3 teams in the SEC who returns both its offensive coordinator and starting quarterback. That's a positive last I checked. And for a team that rose I think, in my opinion, was well above expectations of what I thought LSU was going to be. I thought they were going to be 7-5 last year. To think that they were West champs and beat Bama year 1 of the Brian Kelly era is truly amazing. If they get Mason Smith healthy for an entire season, he's got the best chance to be Jalen Carter 2.0. But I have Bama just because this feels like the year in which doubting Bama is dumb. It just does. And you could look back at the last 3 times that Bama wasn't picked to win the SEC, 2009, 2012, 2015. Bama won the SEC those years. They won a national championship. And yeah, I get it. You have questions, and we should. It's a team that's 125th in the country in percentage of returning production, the great stat that Bill Connolly puts together every year for ESPN. And you see the questions that we have, a team that has played in these 1-score games. 6 of 9 Power 5 games were 1-score games in the fourth quarter last year for Alabama. They don't have that step on your throat mentality that we're used to seeing from all Nick Saban teams, really. And To think that this year's team, though, is just going to fall off and drift into 9-3 territory is ridiculous. I think we're asking too many questions. We're sleeping on this defense, which could be a vintage Alabama defense with Kevin Steele leading the way. I think the ground game is going to be second to none. One of my bold predictions is that Jace McClellan is going to lead the SEC in rushing this year. I think they get back to that joyless murder ball. They play with a chip on their shoulder. I think they ultimately win the West. I actually don't have a beating LSU, though. I have LSU winning that matchup this year, but Bama still being able to win the division and get back to an SEC championship, going 11-1, and kind of putting some of those dynasty is dead talks to bed, at least for now.
Connor O'Gara, Saturday Down South, one of the best in the business. Connor, last thing before I get you out of here. Does Georgia make it 3 straight national championships, become the first team to do so since the early 1930s?
Yeah, shout out to Ed Woodseth, 1936 Minnesota. They called him Big Ed. He weighed 220 pounds. People don't know that. But yeah, I don't think they do. And I think they have a 10-point lead at halftime of the national championship. And then Mike Bobo shows up. And all of a sudden, we're like, oh, man, this is why he's not Todd Monken. And you see the offense tighten up. You see the play calling come into question. And Ohio State gets revenge on Georgia after Georgia had no business winning that game in the Peach Bowl, game that I witnessed. And Ohio State finds a way to come back and win a national championship. But I do think that Georgia gets there undefeated. I think that they have all the pieces in place to be able to make that happen, despite this offseason that is left a lot of people wondering if the focus is really in the right place. But I'm a Carson Beck believer. I think he gets to New York and represents the SEC at the Heisman Trophy ceremony. I think that we see a lot of great things from this offense, which is just loaded at receiver. I think Georgia has its second 1,000-yard receiver in program history. That's right. They've only had one in program history. I think Ladd McConkey does that this year. I love the addition of Dom Lovett from Mizzou. But yeah, I think this Georgia team has weaknesses, and its weaknesses is in the form of an offensive play caller. I don't think that we can just assume that 5-star talent wins out every single time. If you look at the play callers with total autonomy on their side of the ball, who have won a national championship in the playoff era, Mike Bobo doesn't fit that bill. And I think he ends up being the reason that Georgia doesn't win a national championship and doesn't make it 3 in a row. Winning 3 in a row is tough, man. There's a reason that this hasn't been done since the first term of the FDR administration. Okay. Like, this is really, really hard. And I think Georgia comes up maybe 1/2 short of being able to get that done.
Ohio State is the pick for Connor O'Gara. Connor O'Gara, Saturday Down South. Connor, appreciate you taking the time, my friend. Let's definitely do it again soon.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, man.
Okay, that was Connor O'Gara of Saturday Down South. Appreciate Connor taking the time this morning, and really, really great stuff. He's got the Gamecocks finishing second in the SEC East, and Ohio State taking down Georgia in the national championship. I don't think we'd shed a tear if that was the final result. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, we'll get into our conversation around the Gamecocks offensive line as the position unit preview series, the Big Uglies up front, continues. All that and more on the other side of this break. You're tuned in to The Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars. And there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. The Daily Crow is also sponsored by Rhine Law Firm, LLC, principally managed by James R. Rhine Jr., located at 1350 Ashley River Road, Suite 650, Charleston, South Carolina, 29407, serving the greater Charleston area.
Marshall Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Wednesday, August the 9th, 2023. Again, I want to say thank you all for tuning in, and thank you to Connor O'Gara of Saturday Down South for taking the time. A great conversation, man. Connor, truly one of the best in the business. Was a true pleasure, a blessing to meet him at SEC Media Days in Nashville, Tennessee. Grateful for the opportunity to chat with him this morning, and I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation with Connor O'Gara. I see a question here from Austin Gregory. He says, what is your playoff field projection? Austin, that's a great question because I haven't really sat down and locked in my projected playoff. I think what we'll do, though, is this. I will lock in a projected playoff and a national champion. We'll most likely drop that graphic the week of week 0. Because, of course, we'll be out of town that week. There will be no TDC. But to add to the content, if we're going to be dropping a lot of graphics, a lot of rankings, kind of closing out list season, if you will, I'll make that one of them. I will drop a projected playoff and my predicted national champion. Speak of the devil, Eric Reese. What's up, my dude? Appreciate you tuning in, Eric Reese, the man behind all of the graphics you see. He makes us look cool, bottom line. Guys, that being said, hey, let's keep the conversation rolling. We're wrapping up conversation regarding the Gamecocks offensive line heading into the 2023 football season. What will define success for South Carolina's offensive front this upcoming season. A much maligned group that is looking for different results. It has been quite some time since we could look at the offensive line and identify it as a true strength of the football team. I mean, it feels like time and time again, year after year after year, this time, every single preseason, we find ourselves asking, what's the offensive line going to be this year? There's always playmakers. There's always skill position guys. But is the offensive line intact to maximize the potential and talent of the offensive side of the football? When I look at this group, Connor O'Gara brought something to my attention that I was not aware of. As we all know, South Carolina, I've documented many times, surrendered 31 sacks a season ago and finished outside of the top 100 in rushing offense. And originally I had said, you know what? You get inside the top 100 running the football, I will take that. What I did not realize is that South Carolina, if you look even deeper, in the first 2 years of the Shane Beamer era, the Gamecocks have failed to finish inside of the top 90 either of those 2 seasons. And while there are question marks, certainly that we have pointed out, around 50 or so less starts returning, it's time for the Gamecocks offensive line to take a step forward. Yes, I understand everything on paper says this rushing attack will be worse. From the questions in the running back room to the questions up front. Having to replace Jovan Gwynn, Dylan Wanham, Eric Douglas, relying on transfers from Yale, Charlotte, Mercer, Western Illinois. Relying on returners who have not been very good, call it for what it is, and relying on true freshmen who may or may not be ready to play. With all that being said, you have not finished inside the top 90 in rushing offense. I want to believe it's possible, guys, and I'm setting that for the goal and the expectation and what will define a successful season in the running game. Top 90 nationally for the first time in the Shane Beamer era. Embrace mediocrity in the running game. Embrace mediocrity on the offensive line. Because South Carolina has not even been that. They've been abysmal. They've been terrible. And I understand the way they finished last season was a great improvement. But you have to look at the entire body of work. You can't just look at a 2 or 3 game sample size and say, okay, well, they deserve a B grade, A grade, whatever it is coming into the season. As a whole, I think it's an attainable goal, and I think it's one South Carolina should set out in its rushing attack, although there are so many reasons to look and say this is going to be worse this season than it was last year. Top 90 rushing offense, I think that's doable for this group, even with all the question marks that surround them. Protecting your quarterback going to be paramount this season. You gave up 31 sacks a season ago, as I mentioned previously. 26 or less sacks allowed. Let me explain how I got to that number. We assume you're going to play 13 games. 13 games in this season. 12 regular season and a bowl game. 26 sacks allowed would put you at 2 sacks allowed per game. Again, guys, maybe I have unrealistic expectations, but I think that's doable. I think that is doable. You also factor in an offensive scheme and an offensive system that should help Spencer Rattler. It should help the offensive line. It should help him get the football out much quicker, make quicker decisions, get the ball to his playmakers, not take those hits he was taking a season ago. 26 or less sacks. Keep Spencer Rattler upright. 2 sacks per game. There should be a couple of games this year you don't give up a sack, or maybe just give up 1 sack. Now, there's going to be some challenges. The defensive lines of Georgia, Kentucky, Missouri, even Tennessee, Mississippi State. There's going to be some challenges, no doubt. I think 26 or less, sacks allowed. I think that is an achievable goal for this unit in this season. Guys, you need to find a solid starting 5 during fall camp to lead better results out of the gate. The Gamecocks cannot afford the slow start across their entire football team that they had a season ago. The offensive line, guys, for the first half of the year, as you all know, it was not very good. It wasn't really until the Kentucky game, maybe after the Missouri game. It wasn't really until then that it started clicking. I mean, even in the game against Florida, it wasn't good in that game either. So this unit had its moments, but one thing is certain, the start was so slow out of the gate. From the very jump against Georgia State, couldn't run the football. Couldn't really run it against Arkansas. You could throw it, but couldn't really run it. Obviously could not run it against Georgia. You even had trouble mustering a rushing attack against Charlotte and SC State. There may not be a position group for which fall camp is more important than the Gamecocks offensive line. When you factor in the gauntlet that you open up with North Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi State, Tennessee, even Florida, having that starting 5 solidified, ready to play their absolute best out of the jump, and also building depth during fall camp. You're going to need 7 or 8 at minimum that can go for you. Fall camp is pivotal for this group. You've got to find that solid starting 5 that you can depend on, that you can rely on, that you can feel good about going into the front half of this schedule. Guys, I want to see Nick Gargiulo emerge as a leader up front. Talked a lot about him yesterday. I think you look at him, he's got all the credentials. The way folks talk about him, he's tough, he's tenacious, he's physical. He's a leader. And he did all those things at Yale, right? Was a captain on Yale's football team, which is a rarity, an honor, if you will. Helped lead them in rushing, total offense, all that good stuff. He's got to take a step up in regards to competition, going from Yale to the SEC. But at 6'5", 327, going to start at one of the guard positions, I think Nick Gargiulo is a guy who we labeled, by the way, the best overall of this group. I think he's a guy that you can look at and say, this is our dude. This is a leader for our football team. He's a natural leader. Again, he's done it before, a leader of men. And for an offensive line that I think is looking for that guy. I mean, if I asked you right now, who's the leader of the offensive front? Who's the veteran presence? Who's the veteran leader in that room? It was Jalen Nichols. I don't know who it is now. Is it Vershawn Lee? Is it Tyshawn Wanamaker? Is it somebody else? I think Nick Gargiulo very naturally slides into that role. Again, he's done it before. He's led men before. He's led an offensive line unit. I want to see Nick Gargiulo be that guy this season. Guys, for this season to be a success for the Gamecocks offensive line, you also have to find answers at the left tackle position. I know that Sidney Fugar is going to be the first man out most likely, and he may hold on to that position the entire season. But when you lose your top guy in a Jalen Nichols, that's a concern, guys. I mean, that's a major question mark. Because we talked about the running game, generating a running game, but more importantly, protecting Spencer Rattler's blind side. And if it's not Sidney Fugar, the Western Illinois transfer, who's it going to be? Is it Ja'Kai Moore? Is it somebody else? Solving that left tackle position, has to be figured out. A major hole was left when Jalen Nichols went down with injury. But that's got to be solved. Otherwise, this offense is not going to operate at the capacity we know it's capable of. Guys, you need your portal additions to provide quality depth on the offensive front. I talked about Sidney Fugar. He'll most likely be starting. Also, Nick Gargiulo. He'll most likely, and I think will be starting as well. But guys like Nee Manziel from Mercer, Jackson Hughes from Charlotte. I'm not saying these guys need to be big-time contributors. If they are, that's great. They don't have to be that, though. But South Carolina has got to find quality depth. See, that's the biggest concern, I think, with this group. You can have a good starting five, but if you don't have 3-4 more guys that can rotate in, you'll get exposed at some point. And you went out to the portal, you handpicked these guys, you felt like these guys were quality adds to your football team. You need your portal additions to provide that depth for you this season. And finally, guys, in order for this season to be a success for the Gamecocks offensive front, while all of the focus is on 2023 and winning as many as you can in this season, it's also about building towards the future, right? That's what you're doing right now. You're laying the building blocks of your program in these first couple of years of Shane Beamer. I want to see the offensive line of tomorrow, the quote-unquote Great Wall of Carolina. I want them to see some significant action and get development in 2023. We understand the challenges of playing in this league straight out of high school. It's an extremely difficult challenge. That's why you don't see it very often. And if you're playing a bunch of freshmen on your offensive line, that's typically not a good sign. But guys like Marquis Anderson, who got on campus in spring and is impressed already, a guy like Trovon Bowe, Tree Babalade, who we heard a lot about in recruiting, these are your stars of tomorrow. They may not be ready. They're most likely not ready to contribute today, but they're undoubtedly your stars of tomorrow. Getting them in there, getting their feet wet. I'm not saying they should be in there against Georgia, but get them some experience, get them some action while also probably holding on to their red shirt. But begin to develop these guys because you want to set yourself up for, in 2 or 3 years, we're not having these conversations anymore about the offensive line. We're talking about the offensive line as a strength for South Carolina football. And if you can develop those youngsters, that very well may be the case sooner rather than later. Guys, let's jump into a quick break. On the other side, we'll wrap up the conversation regarding Gamecocks offensive line. We'll keep the convo rolling here on this Wednesday. You're tuned in to the Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. The Daily Crow is also sponsored by Rhine Law Firm, LLC, principally managed by James R. Rhine Jr., located at 1350 Ashley River Road, Suite 650, Charleston, South Carolina, 29407, serving the greater Charleston area.
Marshall Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back here on this Wednesday, August the 9th, 2023. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Really excited to get into our Q&A Power Hour in hour number 3. Want to hear from you at 843-790-3377. Also, of course, we got our friend Chris Marler upcoming in about 10 minutes or so. In the meantime, we're going to continue the conversation as we wrap up talking Gamecocks offensive linemen, and we wrap up talking Gamecocks offense, by the way, and our position unit preview series. A tale as old as time. A song as old as rhyme. The South Carolina offensive line being a question mark heading into the season. Isn't a talent issue. Is it a coaching issue? Was it a scheme issue? That's sort of the question I have. Because you look back at the first 2 years of the Shane Beamer era, and it's been head-scratching to say the least, right? I mean, who can forget 2021? We spent that entire preseason saying to ourselves, offensive line's a strength. This team's going to be able to run the football. You got Kevin Harris returning. An offensive line that paved the way for a 1,000-yard rusher. And for whatever reason, it just never clicked at any point that season outside of maybe that Duke's Mayo Bowl against UNC in 2021. Last year, the expectations were adjusted. And in hindsight, I graded South Carolina's offensive line heading into last season a D+. That was with a group that had just over 130 starts returning, a veteran offensive line. I believe it was 3 or 4 starters returned on that group. And the Gamecocks, of course, unfortunately, struggled yet again. There was hope, though, a season ago. I thought the Lonnie Teasley taking over as offensive line coach full-time when Greg Atkins, of course, had to step aside because of health issues. And thank goodness, obviously, Coach Atkins is okay and still on staff. I thought you saw a different type of energy, a different attack from the offensive front in the second half of the season. And with Lonnie Teasley's return as offensive line coach, I think that's one of the things you can point to as one of the biggest reasons for optimism for this group. You know, I've heard a lot about addition by subtraction from people over the last couple of days and over the last couple of weeks as well when talking about this group. Let's look at what you lost from last year. Guys, Jovan Gwynn was a second-team All-SEC guy. Not too bad. Eric Douglas, not an elite center, but a veteran player at that position, and I think a guy who was solid, not great, but solid. And then Dylan Wanham at the tackle spot, which, you know, by all accounts, again, not an elite tackle per se, but I would say, yet again, a solid player. Certainly had that veteran experience as well. The loss of Jalen Nichols in the spring game was detrimental because even with his return, guys, I felt as if this was one of the biggest question marks on South Carolina's football team entering this season. You returned just under 50 less starts than you had a season ago from a group that finished outside of the top 100 nationally in rushing offense and surrendered 31 sacks. Now, there are two different ways to look at that. Do you say, we lost all these guys, we lost all that experience, but it wasn't great experience. It's addition by subtraction. We've got some dudes filling in we feel will do an even better job than maybe some of those veteran pieces we had. Or do you view it as South Carolina returns even less experience, even less proven commodities, and they lost Jalen Nichols, their best offensive lineman? All of those factors from a group that was as porous as they were for about 90% of the season. How much does a schematical change? We talk about Spencer Rattler, Juice Wells, the weapons, the scoring. How much does it help the offensive line? Is this a scheme that is able to take some of the pressures off of the offensive line? Do we see Spencer Rattler getting the ball out quickly? Is it a situation in which we see a lot of halfback draws and screens and them doing creative things to slow down a pass rush, to slow down a defensive front? Is South Carolina able to get somewhat of a run push and keep the Gamecocks out of second and third and long, a place where offenses go to die? I like the pickup of Nick Gargiulo from Yale. I think it was a solid portal addition. I'm wait and see on Sidney Fugar from Western Illinois, Jackson Hughes from Charlotte, and Nee Manziel from Mercer. Shane Beamer and company had done a fantastic job in developing guys like that and getting the most out of them. But I would say for any position, I don't think there's a greater transition from the lower level to a higher level than the offensive front, than the line of scrimmage. Because you think about when the Gamecocks play an inferior opponent. Think about when they play, let's just say Mercer. Think about when they play Furman. Think about last year when you played Charlotte. What's the biggest difference, guys? There are great skill position guys at every single level. It's line of scrimmage. That's the biggest difference between FBS and FCS. That's the biggest difference between D1 and D2. And so, are those guys they picked up ready to step up? You got some great young talent in the room, but realistically, are they ready to play? Are they ready to make a contribution? And the returners you do have from last year, of course, Vershawn Lee, most notably, will slide over to the center spot. That's a big question mark. Ja'Kai Moore, what do you get from him? Tyshawn Wanamaker, what do you get from him? A guy that we've seen flashes from those guys, but never anything consistent. Tons of question marks surround this group. And while I don't think it is the most questionable, most suspect, biggest deficiency in terms of position groups at South Carolina, it's right up there. Give Shane Beamer, Lonnie Teasley, Greg Atkins, Dabble Loggins, the entire offensive staff credit for the way they are recruiting the offensive line. And we're talking some of the best offensive line classes South Carolina has ever seen. So Shane Beamer and company, they know it's a problem area, and they're doing everything they can to address it. Unfortunately, those guys either aren't on campus or the ones that aren't ready to play. Ideally, these guys need a year or two at minimum in the weight room to adjust to SEC ball. That being said, as I mentioned, I think Nick Gargiulo's a nice pickup. I think he boosts the offensive line. But I keep coming back to nearly 50 less starts from a group that finished outside of the top 100 in rushing and surrendered 31 sacks. And on paper, and the beautiful thing is this, the game's not played on paper. But on paper, I'm having trouble finding things that I can point to say, well, this is why they'll be better. This is why they'll take a step forward. This is why they'll be successful. We're not asking for the Gamecocks to have a top half of the SEC offensive line. Just be average. Heck, just be mediocre. Just don't be the reason South Carolina is losing football games. That being said, guys, I grade the Gamecocks offensive line heading into the 2023 football season a D+. And this comes back to, guys, not just the starting five, but depth and the lack thereof. There are serious question marks up front. There are serious holes. Does not mean this unit can't overachieve. Does not mean this unit can't tread water and be held by Scotch tape. It doesn't mean that. Doesn't mean South Carolina can't still be successful offensively. But what it does mean is there was a challenge for Gamecocks offensive coordinator Dowell Loggins. It'll be up to him to scheme around one of the greatest deficiencies on South Carolina's roster, which is a task much easier said than done. Guys, that's going to wrap up our breakdown of the Gamecocks offensive line as the position unit preview series for the offensive side of the football concludes. We will begin to discuss South Carolina's defensive line tomorrow and Friday. Then next week, we will get into linebackers on Monday. We'll get into defensive backs on Wednesday. And then on Friday, we will jam kickers and punters all into one show. Guys, we're not going to jump into a break. We're going to wait on my friend Chris Marler. He will join us here in just a second. Looking forward to chatting with Chris. Always a pleasure. Always a fantastic time. His first appearance on TDC as a weekly guest. Really excited for that. Chase Floyd says, I called it. Well, Chase, you already knew what the grade was. And I've already posted the graphic. So you should have known what it was. You should have known what it was. Let's see. Austin Gregory, Marler said on Twitter last night he'd like to discuss sports betting and sports betting only on today's show. I hear you. Okay. We are getting Chris Marler in here, like I mentioned. Guys, again, thank you all so much. The continued love and support. And when I only promise to be fair. I only promise to be fair. So I'm not going to sit there and talk about the offensive line and tell you there's just no hope. Write them off. This group is done. But going into the season, it's the 13th or 14th, maybe 12th. It's the 12th or 13th rated unit in the SEC. Just bottom line, guys. Bottom line. That's it. So it very well could overachieve. I'm keeping very realistic expectations when it comes to the offensive line. Yes, John Edward. Defensive line tomorrow and Friday. Linebackers Monday and Tuesday. Secondary Wednesday and Thursday. And then kickers and punters, we will jam into one show on that Friday. Because admittedly, guys, for kickers and punters, I don't think we really need to say most approved, best of all. I think we all know who those people are. So we'll just kind of hammer the top storylines. What'll define success, and then overall grade, which, I don't think you guys will be surprised what those are, because when you talk Beamer Ball, special teams, all that good stuff, it pretty much speaks for itself. All right, cool. We got him in here, guys. We're going to go ahead and rock. Chris Marler of Saturday Down South, making his debut as a weekly guest on TDC. Chris, first things first, appreciate you taking the time. How disrespected were you when you saw that I also brought Connor O'Gara on today?
I love Connor. Connor and I are great. Yeah, we used to be coworkers and we're not anymore, but we've I love Connor. I love Connor to death. I was excited that we were both on the same show because we haven't been on the same show together in way too long. Him and I need to remedy that and do that this season for sure.
Yeah, I didn't mean it even in a disrespectful way. I was just like, I wonder Chris is going to be like, this is a very SDS heavy show today for whatever reason, which it was kind of random. I did that convo with Connor. I was like, okay, we're going to drop this in like a week and a half or something. And I had another guest that was going to be in the first hour cancel. And I was like, well, I guess this just makes sense. So anyways, it just kind of worked out that way. But either way, Chris, appreciate you taking the time, man. Again, I'm looking forward to doing this with you every single week. And really appreciate you being willing to do so. First question for you is this, Chris. How tired are you of talking about conference realignment, NIL, transfer portal, all of the off-season storylines that we seem to get right now?
So I'm not tired of talking about it because I love this job and I love getting to do it every single day and talk about, college football and all that kind of stuff. What I'm tired of is like the bad takes surrounding it. There's like a couple things about it that suck. Like I hate the fact that like the fans and the players are the last two people or last two entities that were involved in this decision-making process at all. Like all of these decisions, it's like government, to be honest. Like I'm not trying to get political, but it's like you have these people in a place of power and they made all of the decisions solely based off of things that are in their own best self-interest. And like, it's TV contracts, it's money, it's all that kind of stuff, land grabs, all that kind of stuff. We've seen the last Rose Bowl. As a diehard college football fan, it's my favorite thing since I was 4 years old. We've seen the last traditional Rose Bowl of our lifetime because it's going to be a part of the playoff this year. And in 2024, you obviously know what happened with the realignment. I'm surprised at some of the stuff that's happened with realignment. Kudos to the Big 12 for going out and getting people. The NIL stuff, what bothers me more than anything is this. It's like, there's been this whole weird mindset from people that if you make a certain amount of money, you're not allowed to have an opinion. Like Eli Drinkwitz came out and said some stuff the other day, and every single thing he said was factual, objective, and fair. And people just crucified him for it because he makes a lot of money. He left App State to go to Mizzou. I'm not sure if anyone in here has ever had a job before, but like you try to promote your career, you try to grow in your career. That's the end goal for everyone. So him getting crucified for that. And the other part is this too. I was real tired of the whole thing with Saban when everyone was like, Saban is just complaining about it because it's like now it's like out of his control and he can't cheat and get recruits anymore. If you think Alabama's going to struggle to get recruits because they're paying for players, you haven't been watching any Alabama football for my entire lifetime. Like paying players is what we do best, besides winning fake national championships. So that being said, this whole idea that they're not going to be able to, like everyone's just complaining about it. No, like the NCAA just washed their hands of this. They backed away, didn't do anything, put in zero regulation, and then dropped all of these changes in college football at once, and then we're just like, bye. Like there's a lot of real issues here on a lot of real different levels, and there's no regulation for it. And it varies from team to team, from conference to conference, and from state to state. It's a nightmare. And it cracks me up that people are just like, if you make a lot of money, I don't want to hear about it. Like, you're not allowed to have an opinion. Luckily, I don't make a lot of money, so I'm allowed to have an opinion on it.
Chris, I was going to say, you know as well as I do that it is interesting, especially on social media. If you are someone who is known, whether you're a coach, a pro athlete, especially if you're making a lot of money, there is no sympathy for you. I mean, look at the submarine thing that imploded. I mean, the memes and the videos and everything that followed was like the biggest joke on the internet. It's like, well, they were billionaires, so they got what they deserve. You know, it's just like, it's if you make a lot of money, yeah, there's no empathy for you. Anyways, back to Chris, the conference realignment thing. At all. Your thoughts on the SEC's role in this? I thought Greg Sankey yesterday went on Feinbaum. Every time he speaks, man, I mean, he's just, not trying to give Greg Sankey any more pats on the back than he needs, because obviously he is the czar of college football. But every time he speaks, it comes from a place that feels like of confidence, feeling like they're in a great position. They hold the cards, which, I mean, they are. And I thought he made some very bold statements like, we don't need to be on the West Coast to be nationally prominent, nationally recognized. Your just overall thoughts on the SEC's position while there's chaos in the Pac-12, Big 12, ACC. They're just kind of sitting back and watching this all unfold.
Yeah, imagine like just kind of sticking to your guns and knowing that what you have, right? Like this is like the most know yourself, know your worth move of all time. Just like I know what I got, and this is what I'm sitting with, and like I don't need to. What he said yesterday about we don't need to be in 4 different time zones to be relevant was so chef's kiss, perfect and spot on, and it's accurate too. The Big Ten's done a great job of going out and to get 4 more teams. So the Big Ten now has 18 teams, but when you break it down, they have 4 teams. So they're still just the Big 4, but with 14 teams. Because when you look at a place of relevance, it's Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and USC, and that's it. And I think what Sankey said yesterday, I mean, sure, I think in the future they're going to probably try to go out and get someone, but he's been ahead of every single step at every single part of this process. So there's no part of me that thinks it's like people that are saying like, oh, the SEC is lagging behind. I saw one person the other day say something about, I was like, this is exactly what the Pac-12 said too 12 years ago. If you're going to put your eggs in that basket and compare the SEC to the Pac-12, I just have a hard time believing the SEC is going to disintegrate in the decade. You know what I mean? I thought he did a tremendous job with it. It'll be interesting to see where they go from here. But it's also one of those things too, where it's like, I think he's trying to figure out the best move for the conference and not necessarily like, hey, we got to get like, if you're the Big Ten, you haven't won anything of significance since 2014. And then before that, when was it? 2002? Like the SEC is the premier conference, and they're the premier conference in almost every single major money-making sport. So we don't need to be acting in some like panicked way and going out and grabbing all these extra teams. The Big Ten does. The Big 12 does. They need all the help they can get. Like, you want to throw shit at the wall, you can. Go out and get Washington and UCLA and all that kind of stuff. Let them go to Piscataway and pretend like anyone gives a shit about that game. I don't even know where Piscataway is. It could be in like fucking Narnia for all I know. Like, I don't mean like that is anyway. But yeah, that's the whole thing. It's so stupid.
Chris, if and when, because I think we'd probably both agree, like expansion is going to continue. I'm sure the SEC at some point, if it makes sense, will add more teams. Let's just say, who would you say would be the top 3 or 4 candidates you think would make the most sense? Obviously, Florida State is one that people have thrown that name around. Clemson, maybe, North Carolina, Virginia Tech, whatever. Are there some that stand out to you if the SEC were to say get to 20 teams that you would think would make a lot of sense for the conference to add?
All right, I'm just going to be a dickhead for a second, and I'll just tell you what petty Chris would do. Petty LaBelle, Petty Wop, whatever you want to call me. This is what petty Chris would do. I would go out and get Georgia Tech, Tulane, Swanee, and maybe one more. Like, I would make the original SEC teams. I would refuse to go to 9 games. I might fucking go to 7 if I want to. I would not go to 9 games, and I would just double birds to the Big Ten because like there's no reason for us to change anything. Now, if we're being serious, stay away from Miami. Everyone kind of seems like it's a regional fit, all that kind of stuff. Miami is I would bet almost anything. The next thing they do at the Big Ten, if they try to expand to 20, is go get Miami, because you've already seen them try to touch every single part of the continental United States. Miami is a great academic school. It's at the very tip, obviously, of Florida. It's a program that has some historical significance and value, but fills up, I don't know, a 1,300 seat stadium like most of the teams in the Big Ten West. So that's a perfect fit as well. If you're the SEC, go get Florida State, go get Clemson. I say you go get UNC over Duke. You don't need Duke. I mean, I think Duke gets shit on for the program there. They won 9 games last year with the first year head coach. They're gonna be good this year. Go get UNC, because it's a more fun and year-round academic and athletic involvement, like they are in other sports. And then go get Virginia. I think Virginia's a better fit for the Big Ten, but nobody wants to go to Blacksburg. Don't make me go to Blacksburg. So I think those are the 3 or 4 I would take.
Shifting gears, Chris, have you seen the Johnny Manziel documentary yet?
I watched it twice yesterday.
Twice? Okay. I watched it last night. I know you obviously had a reaction because you have very vivid memories of what Johnny Manziel did to the Alabama Crimson Tide. But my thoughts after that, because they went a couple different directions. My immediate thought, though, and this is my bias coming out, is like, where is the Steven Garcia documentary? Because Steven Garcia is Johnny Manziel without a Heisman. I'm like, they kind of lived the same life, just not in the Garcia, not in the spotlight nearly to the amount. But I'm like, they all did the same things. Like they both partied, they both beat Alabama. I mean, it's just like they are carbon copies of each other.
Let's where it stops, though. I mean, listen, you know as well as I do. Like I love Steven Garcia. Regardless of what happened, I live in Columbia now. Every time I pass Village and eat pizza, I have to shoot him a picture of it and all that good stuff. I love Steven Garcia. One of my favorite interviews we've ever done on our podcast was with you and him, and he showed up 10 minutes late, shirtless in bed, drinking a Coors Light. And I was like, bro, what are we doing? What is happening here? That would be I would watch the doc for sure. Was the question about Manziel that doc just
yeah? I mean, I guess we can move to that. Your thoughts though on the documentary? I mean, I thought it was I wanted more. That was the number one thing I've seen from everybody. Is we want more. I thought it ended very abruptly. It's well, what else is going on with Johnny Manziel? But it was also a great reminder of you just. Because I was fresh out of college watching Johnny Manziel, but you go back, Jadeveon Clowney was in the SEC. That was an incredible time, man.
Mm-hmm.
And when A&M and Mizzou just jumped that was just an incredible time for SEC football with some very noteworthy type of personalities led by a Manziel, which you almost kind of forget how good he was. I mean, he was electric.
So my takeaway from the whole doc was it was awesome. They did a great job with it. Loved seeing my buddy Billy Lucci on there and all that kind of stuff. And he told me some of the stories I'm not going to repeat. He told me some at media days, and it was hilarious. It's all the stuff you would think with Johnny. So it was cool. You get to see all these behind-the-scenes things. I loved how honest he was about everything. And it didn't come off to me as he's still the immature kid that is, probably a little too much and too arrogant, whatever. He seems to be humbled, and he seems to have, here's the bottom line. He said one thing. I'm big into mental health anyway. And so, we can joke around all we want about how he's a bust or he's a blah, blah, blah. He's diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which is not his fault. That's just a chemical imbalance in your brain, which is very difficult to deal with, and especially if it goes undiagnosed for a majority of your life while you're in the spotlight. I mean, I was a Division II baseball player. I would have been a giant shitbag if I had anything close to the amount of money that kid had or the success. But the other thing is this, too. This is what I mainly forgot about. One, how that A&M team, I've said this for years, and I'm a Bama guy. That A&M team was the best team in the country at the end of that season. There was nobody who was going to beat that A&M team. I think there's 5 or 6 teams that would have beaten Notre Dame from the SEC alone. I think Bama, Georgia, A&M, South Carolina, Florida, and LSU. If you look at those teams from that year, and it sounds egregious and arrogant. Florida was 11-1 in the regular season. Carolina had 11 wins, beat the shit out of Georgia that year, 35-7. Anyway, that aside, the thing that I forgot that it was all so quick. Nobody heard about Johnny Manziel really until November 10th. He was putting up great numbers, but nobody was really paying attention to him until November 10th. And if you remember, because I do, the week before, Bama plays LSU and has this incredible comeback in the last drive of the game. And I remember going to this game I don't give a shit. What's A&M gonna do? And he bursts on the scene, and then he beats Bama They go undefeated the rest of the way. They torch Oklahoma. He puts up like 500 yards of offense by himself. And then you go into like the offseason, and it just, I mean, that is a snowball avalanche that just took off. And like, I thought it was really cool how honest he was about all of the things that happened. And even with what he said about Cleveland, it sucks. It's like shitty, like some of the decisions he was making, the self-sabotage. But he said one thing that resonated with me more than anything, where he said something about, he's like, you're upset that I missed practice. He's like, I'm the best fucking player in the country. Like it's like, yeah, that's his. And if you think about the timing of that, like that's kind of how football was run at that point.
And to think that he was the best football player in the country, while I think it's understood he was not watching film. If he wasn't watching the NFL, I don't think he was watching it in college. And I think what was it, his buddy said that, like, I never saw him look at a playbook once. He just went out there and played, which maybe some over-exaggeration, but I mean, he knew enough. He did enough to – and you know what I respected about the documentary too?
Yeah.
Was Cliff Kingsbury not trying to, like, change him. They were just like, all right, listen, you just better play good. I don't care what you do. Just play good. I was like, I respect that. I respect it. Like, honestly, I respect the hell out of it. It's like, hey, this is what gets this guy – it's like Batman going into his scoot like that. That's what makes him go.
Right.
And, you know, I think too, what happened to Johnny Manziel, man, is it's interesting. Like his emergence on the scene, and also like social media was really getting going. And I think, you know, if he's 5 years earlier, there's no Twitter, or Twitter's not nearly as prominent. You know, it may not be as much in your face, but I mean, Twitter, Instagram, all of it, he was all over it. I mean, dude, I thought too, is like when he tweeted, he said he tweeted before the Alabama game, the quote before 300.
That was
like,
insane.
You would never see that now. You would never see a guy do that.
Ever.
Like, never.
There were a couple of things on the documentary that stood out to like a sore thumb to me that I was like, I tell you what, the hardest I've laughed in I don't even know how long. And I don't know how young your audience is. But I'm watching the doc, and there he's like, yeah, you know, we wrote down like everything we want to do, and it's like bucket list people we want to meet. And I'm looking at Johnny Manziel's, and it's like Will Ferrell, Johnny Knoxville, like somebody, and then he gets to 4, and he's like Jordan, Tiger Woods, so and so, and I'm like, what the fuck is happening right now? But then his friend writes his, and it was all of these like very famous people. I think Willie Nelson was on there, like all these very, very famous people. And then he gets to 5, and he wrote in Meg Ryan. And I was like, bro, you are this is 2013. You wrote in like, I don't know, the short-haired rom-com star from 1993. Like, what are we doing? Like, what kind of mommy issues do you have? I died laughing. That was funny.
I love it. Marler, let's get on the field. Obviously, fall camp is in action across the SEC. Has anything jumped out to you? Have you heard anything? I mean, obviously, I think the top storylines are Alabama's quarterback competition. You know, pads haven't really even gone on yet anyways. I think probably either today or tomorrow, sometime this week, you know, we'll get pads popping. Scrimmages are going to start happening. So we'll get a lot more. But has anything stood out? I mean, of course, LSU had a fight at practice, which, of course, I said just means they're going to kick Bama's ass. But, I mean, anything jump out? Have you run into any information or just heard anything that has kind of made you stop and say, that surprises me from fall camp?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to share it with you because the comment you made about Bama getting their ass kicked. But I mean, no, I think,
or maybe it means Bama's going to kick their ass. I mean, who knows?
You mean like they've done 8 of the last 10 years?
Right.
I mean, yeah, sure, of course, yeah. I mean, you said that, and I was like looking at it, and I was like, I immediately go just do what I always do, which is my biggest toxic trait, which is I'm going to look up facts to argue with somebody, and I know that nobody in the comments is going to do the same thing. But no, like LSU and Bama, that part, that like both of those teams have, I think, kind of taken most of the buzz the first week. The biggest surprise is like Ty Simpson kind of taking the reins a little bit ahead of Jalen Milroe is not surprising. I still think Jalen Milroe is the guy that goes out game one. I think he's the first quarterback that steps on the field for Alabama against Middle Tennessee State. Now, at the end of the year, I'd be shocked if Ty Simpson is not your starting quarterback. I don't think they get that worked out in the first couple weeks. So there's that. The other thing is down at Auburn, Robbie Ashford, the returning incumbent starter, working with the threes, I think is a shock to everyone. He's not a good quarterback.
Right.
He's just not. He's a great kid. His mom is super nice on Twitter. I'm glad she doesn't follow me anymore because I can say more stuff freely, but he's not a good quarterback. He's just not. He's a great athlete, great kid, all that kind of shit. Not a good quarterback. And him working with the threes going into scrimmage one when they're trying to whittle it down to 2 guys is not great. So he's kind of got to ball out this week, and there's not a lot of help around him to really do that. So he's got to kind of do it on his own. It feels like Peyton Thorne is going to be your starter there no matter what. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Around the SEC, I will tell you this. I think that Mizzou is building some momentum going into the season. And I think that Luther Burden is going to be a breakout star in this conference and be really, really good when you look up at the end of the season.
Marler, did you happen to catch any of the drama on Gamecock Twitter over the weekend with the Jalewis Solomon commitment to Auburn NIL fiasco? Did you happen to see that?
Here's the thing, guys. I love South Carolina. I love living here. I love the show. You know I love you. Austin Gregory, real quick, I need to answer this. Says, who's the most volatile fan base on Twitter? It's Tennessee, and then it's Georgia, and it's not even remotely close after that. Vol Twitter is a nightmare.
I love, by the way, though, Marlon, a side note, how honest you are about Alabama fans.
They're awful.
I love that. Yeah.
They're like, we're awful. We're awful. Like, here, and you know what's obnoxious about Alabama fans? I'll say this because I am one, okay? And I overvalue probably my intelligence, my looks, and most of my opinions. I'll be honest. That being said, what's infuriating about Alabama fans isn't the fact that most of them didn't go to school there, okay? What's infuriating about Alabama fans is there's nothing else from that state. There's not a single other point of pride besides what? Fucking Space Camp? That you want to look at that entire state like, hey, we got this. We got a Top Golf in Birmingham. No, you got shark attacks going down in Mobile. You got Space Camp, I think, is leaving the state by the end of like the calendar year in the first place. There's nothing going on in that state besides obesity and poor reading levels in elementary school. That being said, they're really good at football, so they're even more obnoxious. The South Carolina stuff, here's the thing. I get it that you're upset and then Auburn did this and that. The whole premise of cheating is out the door, guys. Let me learn some people a couple things real quick. The Dodge Charger thing, that was obnoxious for years about how Bama's only getting people because of Dodge Chargers. If you're making a whole fucking college decision based on a mid-car at best, that's not even in Fast and Furious movies anymore. That's how washed it is. I mean, what are we talking about here? The way they do that is like you get on campus, you go to the dealership, they give you pay for $1 for that car, and you lease it for 3 to 4 years. And at the end of it, you either give it back or you pay them for it. That's how that whole thing works. Pretty simple shit. Cheating's over. You can't keep crying about cheating because there is no cheating anymore. There's NIL. I mean, don't worry about your follower count. Like, I mean, get your funds up, guys. It's not the best Drake lyric, and I butchered it, but still, like, get your funds up. Go support the NIL system. And that's all I'm going to tell you. Like, you lost. Like, if you're worried about Auburn cheating, do you not remember 2010? Like, what are we talking about? It seemed like the sourest of sour grapes. And I love you guys to death. But it's like the whole cheating thing now is like, you can't cheat. You're allowed to pay everyone.
Don't hate the player, hate the game, Marler. And yeah, don't get your funny up, get your money up. That's for sure. I think that's the motto to live by. Your thoughts, by the way, too. I'd love to hear this because I'm as honest as anybody about the way you are about Bama fans. I mean, I'll tell you the very honest, blunt truth about Gamecock Twitter and the sections of it, if you will. I mean, I've even nicknamed a whole sector, given them their own special nickname. Gamecock Twitter. How do you classify that group of folks? Because there's a lot of great folks in Gamecock Twitter, but I'll tell you this. When Gamecock Twitter or when that certain sector of it gets pissed off, I don't know that there's a more ruthless group of people.
There is. Okay, there is.
They're up there. They're up there. That's all I'm saying.
I just will tell you right now that with Tennessee, man, there's Tennessee fans that hate me now. And it's only because of how accurate I was at saying what was going to happen to them when they went to Athens. That's the truth. Like, I don't say, like, and here's one thing, too, about fans that people don't get, like that fans don't get for themselves. And I honestly just realized this like a month ago. People think that I hate Georgia because I shit on Georgia all the time. No, Georgia's the best team in the country. They're the best program in the country. They have the best coach in the country. And that is coming from an Alabama fan. They are the best at everything right now, and it's not slowing down anytime soon. Their fans, pretty awful sometimes. Pretty awful sometimes. So separating the two, me saying that, hey, like, your fans are awful because they objectively are, is different than saying your team is bad, because that's a very different thing. And what's funny about it, too, is that when you say that and you call it out, this is going to shock you. what usually tends to happen is that those fans come in your comments and prove you right the entire time. So, like, I think with South Carolina fans, I've never had a run in with South Carolina fans. I'm not trying to or say anything rude. I'm sure at some point I will, but I've just never had an issue with South Carolina fans. And like I will pull for them over Clemson. They're way better than Clemson from a fandom standpoint. I think that sometimes they get a little bit ahead of their skis of where they think the program should be or what the program has been because they were blessed to have like some very good years in about a half decade there under Spurrier. But yeah, I mean, I don't have any problems with Carolina fans. I wouldn't put them anywhere close to the top tier of obnoxious fans.
Fair enough. Chris Marler, Saturday Down South. I can't spit it out. And Saturday Football Uncensored, the podcast. Be sure to check it out. Chris, what do y'all have coming up on Saturday Football Uncensored? I know you just dropped yesterday your Big 12 preview. So I guess you guys are obviously just gearing up for kickoff.
Yeah. So we're just doing our preview series right now. We did the ACC, we did the Big 12. We'll probably do the Pac-12 or Big 10 tonight. I'm not really sure. We got JD Pickell coming on. We got some really good guests coming on. And then what we'll do is the last week of the season or last week for the preseason, we're going to hit like every single SEC team hard. You'll be on. We'll have just like in-depth previews for every single team going into the year and our predictions. And I will say this too, like maybe last year is different. Maybe it's not going to be the same success this year. I don't know. But you guys should tune in. Like if you're trying to, like from a gambling standpoint, we were like 18-3 in our preseason picks last year, like for like the whole year. So we're excited. It should be a lot of fun. Gambling's everywhere now, obviously. I always say if you love football and you hate the bleep button, come on over. Water's fine.
Marler, I'm glad you leave it there because I wanted to prime you with this. Gambling is going to be a bigger part of our content than it's ever been. Would love to talk some picks with you either next Wednesday or the week of week one, probably next week. So we go out and get ahead of it. We'll do a little bit of over-unders. We'll do some totals. We'll do some props, what have you. Should be a lot of fun. Chris, appreciate you taking the time, my friend. We'll do it again next week.
Sounds good, brother. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, man. Sounds good. Chris Marler, Saturday Down South, Saturday Football Uncensored. Always a pleasure to talk with Chris. Great stuff. Guys, we're going to jump into a quick break on the other side. We're taking your questions, your comments, your calls, and more as we dive into our Q&A Power Hour here on this Wednesday. You're tuned in to The Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. Daily Crow is also sponsored by Rhine Law Firm, LLC, principally managed by James R. Rhine Jr., located at 1350 Ashley River Road, Suite 650, Charleston, South Carolina, 29407, serving the greater Charleston area.
Muscle Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, I'm back here on this Wednesday, Hump Day, August the 9th, 2023. I want to say thank you to Chris Marler of Saturday Down South, Saturday Football Uncensored. Y'all check out Chris Marler's podcast. Ton of fun. And like you mentioned, we'll be talking South Carolina SEC football the week of week 1 in just a couple of short weeks. Cannot wait for it, guys. It's going to be an absolute blast. Looking forward to it. And looking forward to Toe finally meeting leather as the 2023 college football season begins. That being said, we're going to play this voicemail really quick that was left was left today during the show, and then we'll open up the phone lines, get into your questions, comments, and calls. But we'll start with this voicemail.
Hey, Chris, this is Sean. I gave you a call a few weeks back, and I was telling you the story about jumping off a roof and then going to the 19 Georgia game the next day. And when you played it back on the show, I realized I never got to the point of that, and I kind of just sounded like a blathered idiot. So I wanted to finish on that and then ask you a question. So, I got back from that Georgia game, went to the ER, found out I totally shredded my ankle. So I was stuck in a boot for about a month and a half. And for the first few weeks, I had nothing to do but lay around all day on the couch. So I started exploring the Gamecocks subreddit. And that's actually how I found you. It was around that time that everybody was kind of blasting you. I think they actually kicked you off the thread for promoting your show on there. But that's, I had to look you up because everybody was blasting you. And I was like, man, why are they all hating on this guy? And I quickly found out that, there was some other shows out there at the time. You were doing some of the more in-depth coverage, doing stuff every single day, posting those podcasts. And so that's how I kind of fell into it. So it wasn't just a story about me jumping off a roof being an idiot. But anyways, I wanted to ask you, so, you mentioned how you always call the Georgia game to be a bit closer than what it actually ends up being. And so until they prove it, you're going to call nothing less than a blowout. But see, you go based off facts, and a lot of us like to go based on feelings. And for some reason, this year kind of feels like one of those years that they might just do it again. And so my reasons why are, one, we got to see Beck. We're going to be his first true test. And I think the defense will take a pretty good step up. And maybe they'll be able to stop the run a little bit better. And I think they'll give them some headaches. And then also, I feel like there's another factor in there that could be very interesting. And Connor mentioned it earlier, but not, in relation to our game. The Mike Bobo factor. So we all know what happened when Bobo kind of left Shane out high and dry. And then what happened? We went into Auburn, won that game. And like 3 weeks later, he was fired. And now he's on the staff at Georgia. So I don't know. I just feel something special cooking there, and maybe that Mike Bobo factor is enough to get those boys fired up. Maybe not the boys, but at least Shane. But I don't know. I just wanted to see what you thought about that and what you think about Carson Beck and how you think that's going to factor into that game, as we will be their first true test, and we do have a pretty good lockdown secondary. So keep doing what you're doing, man, and go Cox.
Thank you to Sean for the voicemail. First thing I'll say is this. Yeah, there is for whatever reason, the Gamecocks subreddit hates my guts. It is almost like if you took that portion of Twitter that despises TSUS, just took them out and put them in one place. That is the Gamecocks subreddit. So I got off of Reddit very, very quickly. I don't think I've posted since like 2020. So when you saw me, that was 2019. I'd called Fire Muschamp, whatever, and there were very mixed reviews of TSUS at that time for sure. But anyway, Sean, appreciate you and glad you're able to find the show. And you mentioned the Georgia game. So let's play this game. What would have to happen for South Carolina to, let's just say, make it a fourth quarter game? I'm not even going to say upset Georgia. Make it a game in which it's a one-score game and the Gamecocks can realistically pull off the upset. Number one, similar to what happened in that game in 2019, you're going to need to force a couple of turnovers and win the turnover battle probably 3-1, 3-0, 4-0, something of that nature. You need a defensive and or special teams touchdown. And Spencer Rattler needs to be special. Those three things, in my opinion, have to happen. Now, with Georgia, hey, there's a question around Carson Beck. We're just giving the benefit of the doubt because, hey, it's Georgia, and they're just going to keep on keeping on and pick up right where they left off. Carson Beck could not be it. He's a very talented player, but he could not be it. And stopping the run, I mean, I think South Carolina, I've talked about, we'll talk more next week. We get into the linebacker position. I think there's reasons to believe that, this group could take a step forward and be, much better than they have been. Be much better than they have been, and the run defense could improve. Much easier said than done, though, all the things that I just mentioned. Because basically, Sean, what you're banking on, Georgia's got to play their D game, their D- game, and South Carolina has to play their A game. Now, is it possible? Sure. It's college football. Anything can happen. Is it likely? No, it's not. And when I look at South Carolina right now, would I love for it to be one of those magical afternoons in Athens, Georgia? Absolutely, I would. But realistically, South Carolina's at a severe disadvantage in the trenches, which is going to put even more pressure on Spencer Rattler. And if he's trying to play hero ball and force the ball into coverage, that doesn't bode well against one of the best defenses in college football. And even if Carson Beck is suspect, guys, how much is he going to have to do? I mean, Georgia's got one of the best receiver rooms in college football. Do they have a proven RB1? Maybe not, but they got plenty of talent back there, and their offensive line is the best in the SEC. So it'll take a Herculean effort. I'm not going to tell you it's impossible. I don't see it happening. And you mentioned the Mike Bobo effect. Let me just say this about Mike Bobo, because I know it's really easy to poke and prod at Bobo, and he was at South Carolina and whatever. Georgia last year, I believe they averaged 41.6 points per game, something like that. Had a historic offense last year. The last time Georgia averaged more points per game in a season than last year, guys, it was 2014. Mike Bobo was the OC. So I think with the right Jimmies and Joes, Mike Bobo's a pretty damn good offensive coordinator. And I hope he turns into the Mike Bobo that we think he is, but I don't even think he can screw the pooch, no pun intended, on winning that football game. We'll see. I could be wrong. We'll see. But would take a lot of crazy things happening for South Carolina to, I think, even be in a position to win that game in the fourth quarter. Guys, let's get in the YouTube chat. We'll get into your questions here. Austin Gregory says 4-hour show today due to 2-hour show yesterday. Looking forward to it. Wrong. Sorry about it. Rowdy Rooster, UNC fans going crazy about the Tez Walker news. Let the kid play, just not on game one. I mean, I get it. We'd be going crazy also. We'd be going crazy also. So, let's see. Jeff Gullidge, 2-pick rat. He did that again last night in the sim. I hope that doesn't happen in real life. I hope not either, Jeff. Yeah, Rattler's thrown literally 25 picks in the simulation. But in case you missed it, it's so funny how the simulation works out, because the scores don't really matter to me, guys. It's all about, what's the record? And sure enough, we've got 3 regular season games left. We're 5-4, 3-3 in SEC play, which is exactly, for the most part, I've got Carolina 2-4 at this point in SEC play, not 3-3. But 5-4, the exact same record. I got Carolina at the exact same record. It's wild how the simulation, as dumb as it is, spits out those results. The Gamecock 22 says if we go 7-5, beat Clemson, show more consistency, and beat UNC, I'm fine. 7-5 with a win over Clemson, there's not a Gamecock fan who wouldn't take that season. Let's get into the Big Cock Club Discord. We have some questions in here as well. Guys, by the way, no Mark Ryan next Thursday. Not tomorrow, but next Thursday. Let's see. Rowdy Rooster 75 said, O-line has the potential to be better due to a few factors for me. Number 1, line that was abysmal last year is gone. Number 2, solid pickups in the transfer portal. Number 3, a better scheme offensively. And number 4, a better O-line coach. Hey, listen, that very well could lead to improved results. I mean, that's what we're hoping for. That's what we're hoping for. The only thing I'll say is this. I'm glad Lonnie Teasley's leading the way. He was on the staff last year, though. But still, now he's the lead guy. So there should be an impact felt there. Tyler Knoll, 8-4 realistic. Ceiling, 10-2. Could just as easily go 6-6 or 7-5 if the running game's non-existent and the run defense doesn't improve. Tyler, in my opinion, if the running game's non-existent and the run defense does not improve, I'll go as far as to say this. If South Carolina finishes outside of the top 100 in rush offense and rush defense again, this team's going 6-6. Because you know what? You've cheated death the first 2 years. You've cheated death by, finishing outside of the top 100 in rushing, offense and defense. You've led the SEC in turnovers, and you've relied on special teams to win games. You've played with fire for 2 years and gotten away with it. I don't think you'll do that a third straight year. Because I think every single coach that faces South Carolina is going to say, okay, we're not letting them beat us because of special teams. We're going to neutralize special teams. If South Carolina is going to beat us, it has to be through conventional ways. And so I just don't think South Carolina can finish outside of the top 100 in rushing, offense, and defense and lead the SEC in turnovers again and win 8 games. I don't see it. I just don't see it. Could I be wrong? Sure, but it's just got to improve on both sides. It has to. It absolutely has to. Curtis Scholl says, as painful as it is to say this, I think Clemson will make the playoff. What do y'all think? Do you think Clemson makes the playoff? I mean, their most losable games are what? Florida State, Notre Dame, and South Carolina. Of course, they play UNC. They play NC State. They play, I believe, Miami. That game against Duke week 1. Maybe. Coach Ford says, must be able to run the ball. Must be creative ways to spread the D to allow a running game. Indeed. Coach Ford continues, throwing the ball and scoring is great. But when you play teams with quarterbacks like May, Klubnik, etc., it is a must to run the ball and keep them on the bench. Curtis Scholl says Beamer screwed up and didn't get a good running back in the portal. I hope I'm wrong. Let's see. Sean. I think this is Sean who called in. I see Beck struggling against a solid South Carolina defense. Run defense improves enough to slow the bleed. Rattler drops 300 on a UGA. And the Gamecocks pull off the unthinkable in Athens once again. Sean, let me ask you this. Let's say that happens. If South Carolina's 3-0 with a win over Georgia after 3 weeks, what are the new expectations on the season? Because I tell you this, in my opinion, if Carolina's good enough to go to Georgia and do exactly what you're describing, they're good enough to win the SEC East. I think so. Because in your scenario, it would not be a cheap W. It would be we just straight up lined up and beat them. I mean, I think the expectation's got to be 10 wins. It's got to be 10 wins. Nathan says, just want to shout out Jalen Brooks. He's having a really good camp for the Dallas Cowboys. Appear to be pushing for some older receivers heading into their first preseason game this Saturday. Dallas also has Stephon Gilmore, Rico Dowdle, and Israel McQuamu. Yeah, Dallas. What a connect for the Gamecocks. And Jalen Brooks, shout out to him, man. Glad he's having a good camp. Austin, we aren't going to have any decent footage to work off of going in the Georgia game either. They play some rec league teams before us. They could run the same 2 plays the whole game and win by 50. Yeah, there's not going to be a lot on Carson Beck because they won't have to do a lot. Jeff Gullidge, UGA's quarterback has to play poorly and Rattler plays like he did in the Tennessee game. Yeah, that's a good recipe. That's a very good recipe. Spur Daddy, what do they expect from our fan base? Our mascot is a pissed-off fighting chicken with razor-sharp spurs. We don't have a choice but to be full of piss and vinegar. Let's see. James Martin, Gamecock Twitter is toxic to you, Chris, and I don't get it. A lot of keyboard warriors out there. Ruination. He just don't know, C. Philly. Let him F around and find out. Yeah. I will say this, James Martin. At the risk of, I'm probably going to jinx it, so be it, I accept that. Twitter has been much, much more bearable of late. I know this weekend was crazy, was chaotic, but TSUS wasn't at the center of that. Twitter has been much more tame, but I know that will be short-lived. As we get to game week, it'll pick back up. Emotions will start to run wild. People will start to go crazy. Let's see. Just sorting through your questions on YouTube. $500 FYK says, so pumped for the first game. Will be in attendance, and as a Panthers fan, first time in Bank of America Stadium, college football. How about that, man? How about that? Yeah, John Ever, one more time. We'll start with defensive line tomorrow. We'll do that Thursday and Friday. Then next week, we'll do linebackers Monday, Tuesday. We'll do secondary Wednesday, Thursday, and then kickers and punters on Friday. We'll close it out. And then, of course, guys, let me remind you that following week, so the week of week 0, there will be no TDC. There will be no TDC that week of week 0. So do not fret, though. The podcast will continue. We will have tons of interviews, conversations. We'll be dropping all week long, and graphics as well. We'll still be posting content. There just will not be a 3-hour live show the week of week 0. Let's jump to the phone lines here.
Call from
Brian Marquis.
Brian, what's up, man? How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, man. I appreciate you asking. What's going on?
Hi. This is actually my first live show that I'm usually working while you guys are on. I just had a question about the offense. You probably covered it in an episode that I missed, but what are the things that you are most looking for out of this first year Dowell Logan's offense, and the things that I feel like need to be like, how do you put it? Need to be like, okay, we tried it, maybe let's not do that again, or things you're trying to see less of this year?
Well, when it comes to the offense and certainly the entire football team, and I think the first word that comes to mind is just consistency. You know what I mean? We saw flashes of it last year from South Carolina, but it was way too up and down. And so I think a simplified offense, a simplified attack, one in which Spencer Rattler can just play freely, be himself. You know, listen, he's going to make mistakes. He's not a mistake-free quarterback. That's not who he is. But you like to think you're going to get more good than you get bad from him. So letting him go out, play his game. And also, I think the biggest thing with Dowell Loggins is this. When I think of what I want Dowell Loggins' offense to be, and obviously he knows more football. He's crapped out more football than we'll ever know. But, like, what frustrated us last year? One of the top things I think about is there were times where South Carolina was struggling offensively, and they were not even targeting their top playmakers. The best players weren't touching the football. And so it's one thing if Carolina takes on Georgia week 3 and, you know, you're trying to force the ball to Juice Wells or find creative ways, I should say, to get in the ball, and you're making sure your best players touch the football, then you know what? And you lose, you know what? I think Carolina fans can take just getting beat. Hey, tip your cap. They're a great team. We'll keep it moving. But last year, it just felt like there were games where you left a lot out there by not maximizing the talent that you do have. Now, when it comes to the offense, man, what I'm most looking, or one of the things I'm most looking forward to, I am fascinated with DeCabrion Joyner's role this year, because the past 2, 3, 4 years, whatever, fans have clamored for more and more and more and more of DeCabrion Joyner. He moves out to receiver. Why is he not touching the football? This is going to be the season. Getting the ball. Well, now DeCabrion Joyner, this is his time. He is RB1 going into the season. This is his opportunity to have that type of season that everybody's been looking forward to him having. What does his role look like? How's he able to embrace it? What's the running back room look like? Is South Carolina able to muster up some sort of a running game to support Spencer Rattler? And that's my greatest fear with the offense is that, if you get one-dimensional, I don't care who you're playing, you let a defensive coordinator know you're one-dimensional, it's just going to be very tough for you to move the football. So bottom line is this, my man, I know that was a long-winded answer, but when I look at Daboll Loggins' offense, just something fun, exciting, simple, the players can go out and execute. It's not going to be perfect all the time. It's not going to be – there's going to be some struggles, I'm sure, because you do have real deficiencies in your Jimmies and Joes, which is what makes plays and wins games, but just less of the varying results and a little bit more consistency and making sure that your top players are touching the football on a week-in, week-out basis.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. No, the long answer was great. That's exactly what I was looking for. I asked that because I surprised me and my brother surprised our dad with tickets, and we're going up to Charlotte, game 1. So
very nice. And I'll tell you this, man. I'll tell you this just on a side note. I think that is a game where South Carolina will have success offensively. North Carolina was abysmal a season ago defensively. We'll talk about this a lot more the week of the game, and I'll lock in an updated prediction. Obviously, I've already gone on record 31-27, Carolina getting the win. South Carolina, of course. But, I think that's a game in which I'm worried about Carolina on the line of scrimmage. I don't think UNC has the bodies to expose them, and because of that, I think Spencer Rattler has a field day. I think the running game probably looks a little better than it actually is because, again, I think the Gamecocks offensive line will be able to handle UNC. But it definitely should be offensive fireworks out of the gate, and it has to be because I think that will be a higher scoring game in week 1. So you guys should have a lot of fun at B of A for sure.
Oh, for sure, yeah. And I'll definitely be in that chat after that for the post-game live stream and stuff. So
yeah, it's going to be the post-game call-in show is going to be a blast, man. Definitely call in, tune in, what have you. It's going to be a good time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right. I won't take up much of your time. I need to get back to working for my boss. He's here on the phone. But thank you for having me. Thank you for your time. And go Gamecocks.
Yeah, man. Go Cox. Appreciate you, man. Thanks so much for the call. Shout out, by the way, to Denver, Colorado, where he was calling in from. Love that. Travis Allen says, no Daily Crow on week 0. Isn't that prime time? Travis, listen, I understand. I know. It's week 0, but we are going out to Montana to see family, and that is the week that worked, and so I'm not going to not go so I can stay into the Daily Crow. And, hey, listen, better week 0, Travis, than week 1, right? I mean, I'm sure you guys want to hear all of my takes on Vandy, Hawaii, and whatever the other games are. But, yeah, so – but, again, Travis, to your point, there will be podcast content that comes up because I want to talk gambling on some Hawaii, Vanderbilt, talk some gambling. I want to talk, which we could actually just get ahead of that next week. We really could. So either way, there's going to be tons of content. And by the way, guys, I'll be getting back from Montana, back in South Carolina, back on the home front about 3:00 that Saturday. So we will be back in time. We will be. I haven't even told the BCC this. We will be watching Vandy, Hawaii in the Big Cock Club Discord. Going to be a good time. Looking forward to it. Hunter Kelly, do the Daily Crow on the plane with hotspot. Wish it were possible. Michael Edwards, Chris, are you going to be able to get some inside info on the scrimmages? Michael, we'll see what we can do. We'll see what we can do. Kens, are you a head or tails guy and kick or receive? Tails never fails, and I want to take the ball. Yeah, I want to receive for sure. Nathan says, I'm still more concerned with the O-line than I am Spencer or the running backs. And I think that's fair. I mean, listen, Nathan, I think that's fair because if there's a hole there, you have athletes, right? So I think that's fair. I mean, it is. I think that's fair. They're both a great concern, but I think that's fair for sure. Again, guys, 843-790-3377. James Martin says, I'm enjoying your content, man. Keep it up. James, thank you. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. You the man. Kins finished my season on NCAA Football 14, and Marshawn Lloyd won the Heisman at Southern Cal. Jeez. I don't see it happening, but God, that would be just that'd be brutal. Austin Gregory wants to be the co-host for betting. I hear you. Cox by 1 thought that July 4th was your last break into the holidays. You know, Cox by 1, I thought so too. But this came up. We're going out to see some family in Montana, and I mean, my apologies, guys. My apologies. So, but again, podcast content will be out. Graphics will be out. We're still going to be producing content at a high level. But, yeah, we'll be in Montana the next in 2 weeks. Not next week, in 2 weeks. Austin Gregory, why doesn't Dalton call anymore? I think Dalton got a new job. I think that's what happened. I think Dalton ended up getting a new job. So I could be wrong, but I think that's what happened. Cox by 1, yes. So I said in 2 weeks. That's the week that will be in Montana. Yes. It'll be, we're going the 20th to the 26th. We'll be there. Yeah. And heck, that Saturday, August the 19th, I'm going to a wedding. So at least it's not a wedding during football season. At least it's not. Dude, who recalls last year when I had my sister's wedding the night of the Kentucky game? I am so happy we're not dealing with that again. I love my sister to death, but I'm just happy we're not dealing with weddings during football season. That's all I'm saying. I'm very happy that's not the case. Very happy that's not the case. No weddings during football. So anyways, guys, like I mentioned, roll with the punches. I know y'all will. Podcast will continue to drop. All throughout that week. Week 0, we're in Montana. We're going to have a lot of week 0 chatter as well, talking about Vandy, Hawaii, of course. Like I told you guys, I'm diving more into SEC content than I ever have before. So we're going to talk all these SEC games, not just Carolina. Of course, the focus is going to be on the Gamecocks. It's a Gamecock show still, but we're going to talk all these SEC games. I'm going to give picks, predictions, bets, all that good stuff. On a side note, guys, before we jump into this break, want to tease this to you. Really, really exciting. Of course, we have prize picks, all of our prop plays, all that good stuff. Very exciting call we have this afternoon on the gambling side of things. Stay tuned for that. Guys, that being said, we're going to jump into a quick break. On the other side, we'll keep the conversation rolling, taking more of your questions, your comments, your calls, and more here on this Wednesday. You're tuned in to The Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent ya. Daily Crow is also sponsored by Rhine Law Firm, LLC, principally managed by James R. Rhine Jr., located at 1350 Ashley River Road, Suite 650, Charleston, South Carolina, 29407, serving the greater Charleston area.
Muscle Dougie Ho. Dougie Ho.
All right, guys, we're back taking your questions, comments, calls here on this Wednesday, August the 9th, 2023. You see, we got good boys in the stew. Vibes are high in the studio anytime the pups are here, the rally puppies, as you all know them as. And either way, we're taking your questions, comments, calls, 843-790-3377. That's 843-790-3377. James Martin says, do you think you'll do a series where you do the Gamecocks season on a Heisman level after you're done with the simulations? James, I'm not exactly sure. I'll have to look at my schedule just during game week, in season. You know, it's one of those things where I don't want to overload myself. We're already doing so much. You know, the schedule's already so busy. And I look at it this way. I mean, is it fun to – I think a road to glory would be much more fun. I do, because if we play on Heisman, there are ways to where I can just go undefeated. And, you know, is it that much fun to watch? I feel like it gets boring, really, truly. That being said, though, same time, those are a lot of fun. I know the NCAA content does one no matter what. So I'll keep you guys updated. I'll let you know. I'm not exactly sure if the NCAA content will continue throughout the season, but I tell you this. The season simulation series has been a blast. I mean, it's been a blast, man. So And next weekend will be great, man. What a way to close it out. We've got Vanderbilt on Sunday. We've got, Vanderbilt on Sunday. We've got Kentucky on Monday, and then the game against Clemson on Tuesday. Going to be a ton of fun. By the way, folks, speaking on Montana and me going out of town, I'll say this. Selfishly, I'm excited for it in the sense of I get to cut off a week of the offseason. Like, I get to slice off a week because you guys know, as we get into the countdown, we get to single-digit days or we get to, 2 weeks or less, and it's like those last 10 days are brutal. I mean, they're absolutely brutal. So being able to cut out some of that time and get closer and closer to kickoff while being in a beautiful part of the country, I'm looking forward to that. Jacob Riley, any breakout freshman this year on the defensive side of the football? Dude, Grayson Pup Howard for sure. Absolutely Grayson Pup Howard. I think that's a guy that has freshman All-SEC written all over him. He would be my top guy. Desmond Umeozulu on the edge. That's another big one. Jelon Kilgore in the secondary. Just to name a few. So, Shane Beamer mentioned that true freshmen are going to play at every single position. Ken says, will Garcia be on the show all football season like last year? Ken, I don't think we're doing that again. I know for a fact we're not. We've got Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, on that Monday show, and we're going to stick with the lineup we have, which actually means for the first time since 2018, there will be no Alex McGrath on the airwaves because we've got a lineup, man. And I know that Alex understands because, as the show grows and evolves and gets bigger and bigger and bigger and, the space becomes more valuable, getting people that are, that do it full time for a living, that, are with different entities, stuff like that. That's what's most beneficial for the business and the show, by the way, as a whole. So, anyways, there we will have no Steven Garcia. Our weekly lineup will look like this. On Mondays, Mark Rogers, the voice of college football. Tuesdays, J.C. Sherbert of the Big Spur. Wednesdays, Chris Marler, Saturday Down South, and Saturday Football Uncensored podcast. Thursdays, Mark Ryan of the Fan Upstate, and Fridays, Jake Crane of Crane and Company. So, see, Youngblood says, R.I.P. the Roach Rant. Yeah, it's, I hate it. But it was great for last season, but, just felt like we could change things up a little bit and add some different flavor, and that's what we're doing this season. So, obviously, again, I love that Garcia came on last year. Garcia is a good friend of mine, which is a really, really cool thing to say. And, I know he's busy as well, right? Just had a child, right? His latest child. So, he's also very, very busy on his end as well. Michael Lynn, I hear Fugar could beat out Wanamaker at tackle. Yeah, Michael Lynn, I expect Fugar to start at tackle. Absolutely. Luke RJ, I'm having nightmares of bad offenses like Marcus Satterfield with this new 2 tight ends offense we are hearing, especially like having to punt every time we have any penalties on offense. Luke RJ, first things first, great to hear from you, my friend. Always a pleasure. And the thing I like about Luke RJ, his questions are always very, and his statements even, always very, they make you think. They challenge your way of thinking a lot. And so I would say this, Luke RJ, that's why it's important to keep very realistic expectations. And even in a season where there's no grace period, you have to understand, right, that there's going to be bumps in the road. It's just inevitable, man. It's inevitable. South Carolina is not just going to do what they did against Tennessee every single game. It's not going to happen. There's going to be bumps in the road, right? Because, guys, we've talked about it before with Dabble Loggins. They're not reinventing the wheel offensively. They're going to do a lot of things they did last year. That doesn't mean the results are going to be the same. But I'm simply saying that it may at times look very similar. And people are going to have to just be okay with that. Now, obviously, hopefully, there's much less of the bad and much more of the good, but it is going to look similar. And that's why I've said many times, guys, my prediction for Dowell Loggins, this offense, I think we're going to get to the final weeks of the season. Season's going to conclude. And I think people, some people are going to blame the OC. Some folks are just going to lay it all on Dowell Loggins. He stinks. He's a bum, whatever. But I think folks are going to look and say, you know what? Dowell Loggins was an upgrade, but we got to upgrade the offensive line. We got to upgrade the talent. Let's jump to the phone lines here.
Call from
Peyton.
Peyton, what's going on, man? How are you?
Good. How about yourself, Chris? What's going on, pal?
I am doing fantastic, my friend. I appreciate you asking.
So, calling in today just to speculate a little bit and talk a little bit about next year's recruiting class, specifically the running back position. So I know we have Fuller committed as of right now. I think he was 3-star at the time, that he earned a 4th-star. Is that right?
Yes, he did. Yes, Matthew Fuller did earn a 4th star. Yes.
Yeah. Do you know of any other ones that we're targeting currently? Maybe we're on the hot on their trail. Maybe have you heard anything about any other running backs potentially coming in next season?
Yeah, Peyton. The big one's Daniel Hill. He will announce his commitment on August the 23rd. That's the big one. I mean, that's the one you need to get. South Carolina has been a factor with him for quite some time, and I think you'll have to probably beat out Alabama to get him. But that's one of your big time top prospects, top priority guys. And again, he will announce August the 23rd. When we talk to JC tomorrow, and as we get closer to his commitment date, we'll get a lot more intel and just kind of where he's leaning and how he's feeling and all that. But yeah, I mean, that's the one right there, man, that I think you need to land.
And he's a 5-star right now, right? Or 4-star?
Daniel Hill is a 4-star, I believe. Yeah, pretty sure he's a 4-star. Yeah.
But see, man, that's always what's so interesting about the next year's recruiting classes. All of these guys, they still have their senior year of high school football left to play. Mm-hmm. So even guys like Matthew Fuller that already earned their 4th star, there's no telling, he could potentially have a breakout year and maybe even earn a 5th star. Who knows? But I just think where we're sitting right now, I definitely think that is a big place of concern. I mean, we're already tackling the offensive line position pretty well with Josiah Thomas and Cam Pringle. Those two guys are some studs, man. Like bookends.
Yeah. And Peyton, there's a reason there's so much pressure on Montario Hardesty. I mean, you're talking about recruiting the running back position, and I mean, it's the fact that South Carolina is in this position right now. I know Marshawn Lloyd left, and nobody planned for that, but the fact that the Carry-On Joiners having to be asked to slide over and take the bulk of the responsibility of the room and not having anyone else. I mean, it's just the numbers are not good at the running back position. And that's not just me saying that. You've heard JC say that. You've heard others say that. The numbers are not good at the running back position. So they need to land Daniel Hill desperately just to show that, it's not that they're moving in the right direction when it comes to flipping that room, if you will.
Yeah. Hopefully we can start inching towards Daniel Hill. I didn't even think about him when I came up on my question, but hopefully we can start inching towards that. Maybe land another big fish before this recruiting class is over with. But like you said, I mean, I think that we're headed toward the right direction in a lot of places. I just hadn't heard enough. I wouldn't say not enough necessarily, but I hadn't heard a lot of running back rumblings from Gamecocks recruiting. So I was just calling in to ask about that and just to speculate on 2024's class as a whole. I think it's coming together very, very nicely. I mean, obviously you got Dylan Stewart a couple weeks ago. That's the cherry on top, but it's not even necessarily the cherry on top yet because there's still a long ways to go, and we could we could potentially land another big fish or another big fish, or just some different key places that we could take advantage of in this recruiting trail. But you know, you never really know who's going to go where. But so it's always unpredictable. But like you said, I think we're headed in the right direction.
And I think the 2024 class, Peyton, as well, I think they're primed. If they land Daniel Hill and a couple of the other guys they want, you know, I think finishing with a top 15 class is possible. And I mean, dude, maybe there were some hopes that Carolina would, you know, would have a historic class in regards to like the best in school history. But dude, if you're finishing top 15 in recruiting, that's a huge win if you're Shane Beamer and company. So, and I think they very well could do that.
Absolutely, man. And it's just when you compare where we are right now to where we were 4 seasons ago, it is totally night and day as far as our expectations, who we expect to land, and the national attention as a whole. Because, I mean, there weren't really that many players that were all that excited about going to South Carolina under Will Muschamp. And I really don't blame them. But, you know, I actually Zach Pickens he was class of 2019, same as I was in high school, and I played against him in high school, and he was worth every recruiting statement that you heard about him was true. That guy was a stud coming out of TL Hanna. But you know, it's now that we're building these guys, we're getting 2 Zach Pickens, we're getting 3 Zach Pickens, we're getting multitude of really solid recruits, and I think it's going to paint success. I really do. But it's really all going to come down to how all the young guys that we're going to be bringing in next season, how good they can be, how good they can be put together on the fly, and how good they can mesh over the summer, and how good they can work together and build a relationship as a team. Because, I mean, even this season, we're relying on a lot of freshmen. We're relying on a lot of sophomores. And I don't necessarily believe it's going to be all that different next year. Because with this recruiting class, I expect a lot of these 4- and 5-star guys that we're landing to play as freshmen. So I think it's going to be interesting, but it's definitely going to be fun to watch. And we're in the right direction, especially compared to, like I said, 4 seasons ago where we were, or 3 seasons ago when we went 2-8. Those are some dark days, but we are in a much better place than just 3 seasons ago. So.
Big facts, Peyton.
Anyway.
Well said, my friend. Hey, well said. I appreciate you calling in as always, my man.
Yeah, man. Go Cox. Thanks, Spurs Up Show. Appreciate it, Chris.
Peyton, appreciate you, man. Take care. We'll talk soon. Great stuff from Peyton as always. And again, I think he hits on a lot of good points. And, you know, certainly I expect South Carolina to be, you know, as they get this talent in that they're recruiting, right? I mean, I expect them to play a lot of freshmen this year. I think they'll play a lot of freshmen next year. I mean, you think about next year, your starting quarterback is most likely going to be a redshirt freshman. I mean, I think Carolina's going to be a young team over the next couple of years. And I think that's simply because as you upgrade the talent, I think some of your top talent is going to be your younger guys. Just bottom line, it is what it is. So that's not a bad thing. You know, that's not a bad thing or anything, but, you know, I think that's the reality of where you are. Madison Duncan says, is not having a great running back a product of there aren't that many and too many schools to choose from? You know, maybe so, Madison. I mean, that could certainly factor in. You know, I was thinking, I mean, I couldn't help it. And we've asked the question, and there's probably no point in entertaining this, but I'm like, I still think back and say to myself, what happened with Marshawn Lloyd? Like, why did he leave? You know what I mean? Like, I know people just say he's chasing the bag NIL, but like, was he not getting good NIL at South Carolina? There had to be more to it. There really did. Like, I'm not convinced it was just all NIL. And he had a starting job guaranteed at South Carolina. So, I mean, I know Southern Cal is a better team than South Carolina this year. I get that. Maybe he wants to play for a team that is going to compete for the college football playoff. Maybe. it still just kind of blows my mind that that happened. Like that, it just, Jaheim Bell made sense, right? But I mean, Marshawn Lloyd and people talk about that, oh, no big deal. He wasn't that good. He was a bust. I mean, dude, yes, he dealt with injuries, but guys, Marshawn Lloyd, had he stayed healthy, probably was going to be he was challenging 1,000 yards, which is crazy when you think about, guys, look at how many touchdowns he scored last year also. He led South Carolina in touchdowns. So, it's a lot to replace, man. It's a lot to replace. Lot of production you got to replace there. Brennan M says, chill on my OC for real. When did I even – all I said was keep realistic expectations for the offense, Brennan. Is that too much for the OC? Is that, Austin said, what's most puzzling about Marshawn Lloyd leaving is that he was recruiting players on Twitter 24 hours before entering the portal. Jacob E says, I'd let Kai Kroger throw it down the field before Luke Doty. Austin Gregory, I swear this is absolutely true, and I'm not just saying it, but I had a dream 2 nights ago that Hill chose Bama, and I was with Beamer and told him hardest he had to go, and he agreed. Weird, but true. Wild. I love that. Hunter Johnson says, Doty taking some snaps at wide receiver. We knew it was coming eventually. I guess. I mean, I still think Luke Doty's probably QB2. It's interesting, though. It's interesting for sure. I don't know what to think of it, man, because realistically, is Luke Doty gonna step in and be in our top 3 or 4 wide receiver rotation? No. I mean, who's he gonna beat out? He's not going to beat out Juice Wells, Xavier Legette, Amarian Brown. Is he going to beat out Nick Harbor? I certainly hope not. How about Omega Blake? I'd certainly hope not. Let's see. Hunter Johnson. I think you're speaking on Marshawn Lloyd. Fumbled too much and didn't cut up the field enough. Not a big deal. Hunter, I hear you, man. Hindsight's 2020, but you know, maybe you don't agree. I would have taken Marshawn Lloyd back in a heartbeat. I would have been giddy that he came back. But Chase Floyd probably left because our O-line was and looked at what we have this year. Probably didn't think the line was going to get him to the league. You think so? Michael Lynn, I like Dak better than Lloyd. Well, I mean, you can like him more all you want. Is he a better running back? That's the question. It is, I respect it. I understand. As soon as a guy is not your guy anymore, it's like all loyalty and thoughts. But people loved Marshawn Lloyd, man. People sang his – guys, like it was a year ago to the date, we were watching the Welcome Home – the Hard Knocks style documentary thing. And I remember, they were documenting and detailing Marshawn Lloyd's recovery and, him coming back from that injury and being 110%. People were so fired up for Marshawn Lloyd last year. Loved him. And now that he's not on South Carolina's roster anymore, it's like, well, he sucks. I mean, I don't know, man. I just – anyways. 843-790-3377. I am also excited to see what the Kerryon Joyner does. Hunter Johnson says, to be fair, I was asking to see a change at running back last year after the Arkansas game. Hunter, my question will be why? Oh, I recall. The fumble in the Arkansas game. That's what you're referring to. Okay. Were there a lot of people calling for a change at running back? Kens, if you were a teammate of Lloyd and he transferred like that, would you keep in touch? I couldn't. Kens, you'd be surprised, I think. I think these guys, they don't, I see a lot of guys still interacting with Jaheim Bell on Instagram and stuff. Like, they don't care. I mean, they whatever, man. They don't really, most of them I don't think care, to be honest with you. Jeff Gullidge, I still don't understand why so many people are against Doty. He isn't that bad of a quarterback. Honestly, if we didn't have Rattler, he would be QB1. Jeff, you're going to open up a can of worms with that comment. Morgan Brown, do you think Braswell challenges for significant playing time? And if so, how soon? I think immediately. Morgan, I think DJ Braswell immediately is going to challenge for reps. Maybe not to be the starter, but I very much believe the running back room is going to be running back by committee. I think it's very much so going to be running back by committee. No doubt. No doubt. Yep. I think you're going to see a guy like Dakereon Joyner get 14 or 15, maybe less, 11 or 12 carries. Juju's going to get some carries. Mario Anderson's going to get some carries. DJ Braswell is going to get some carries because I just, we all like Dakereon Joyner, and I'm glad he's getting the first opportunity, but there are no knowns in that running back room. There are no knowns in that running back room. Bruin Nation says, someone said Lloyd was recruiting the night before, but found out next day he wasn't getting some big NIL he had conversation about, got pissed, hit the portal, regretted it, but Caleb Williams convinced him to come out west. I will tell you this, though, Bruin Nation and everybody else on the NIL subject. Watching the Johnny Manziel documentary last night, I know NIL serves as somewhat of a headache for college football fans. But take yourself out of the fan shoes and put yourself in the player shoes. And you watch that Johnny Manziel documentary, and it is mind-boggling to think the amount of money that Johnny Manziel was generating for Texas A&M, and he wasn't seeing a penny of it. He wasn't getting a dime for what he was doing for Texas A&M. So I know that we love to groan and gripe, and college football fans of every school love to complain about NIL, and it's not perfect. There need to be rules, regulations, systems in place. But I don't think college athletes getting screwed over was the better solution. And it's wild to watch that Johnny Manziel documentary and just see, he got screwed. He got royally screwed by the NCAA and by Texas A&M. And, I'm glad athletes are not in that position. I'm happy they're able to compensate something they've worked so hard for, which is their name, their image, and their likeness. Guys, that being said, let's jump into our final break of the day. On the other side, we'll close out the show in style, taking your questions, comments, calls, and more. You're tuned in to The Daily Crow. The Daily Crow is brought to you by our friends at Carolina Cigars. Carolina Cigars has been in operation since 2008, recently taken over by the Peterson family in 2020. Whether you're new to the cigar scene or whether you've been enjoying cigars your entire life, Carolina Cigars has the expertise and knowledge to make your visit to their shop enjoyable. Stop by for a fine cigar and experience their classic cigar lounge where people come together, share conversations, and become friends. So if you're into cigars and you're on Hilton Head Island, you really do need to go by and see them. They offer same-day shipping nationwide, free delivery island-wide for weddings and all special occasions. They're also proud to offer premium cigars at 9 outside humidor locations around Hilton Head Island, and they have special events throughout the year as well. They want to talk to you. They want to engage. They want to share with you their cigar selection they're very proud of and their beautiful cigar lounge. When you're in the Low Country, there's only one place for cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, and there's only one place I get my cigars. That's Carolina Cigars, Hilton Head Island's premier cigar merchant. Come and share your passion. It's all here at Carolina Cigars. Give them a follow on Instagram at Carolina_cigars, or give them a call today at 843-681-8600. That's 843-681-8600. Smoke them if you got them, and tell them that Chris from the Spurs Up Show sent you. Daily Crow is also sponsored by Rhine Law Firm, LLC, principally managed by James R. Rhine Jr., located at 1350 Ashley River Road, Suite 650, Charleston, South Carolina, 29407, serving the greater Charleston area.
Muscle Dougie, ho.
All right, guys, we're back. Final 10 minutes or so here in the Daily Crow, taking your questions, comments, calls, 843-790-3377. That's 843-790-3377. You know what I was just thinking about? Think about how lucky you are if you got to experience a South Carolina football fan appreciation day. Because they are a thing of the past. They no longer even exist. Fan days don't even exist anymore. Think about that. It's crazy when you think about it. Really, truly. It's crazy. But they don't exist. I mean, I remember going to, I literally remember back in 2013, I think. Yeah, I think it was 2013. I remember back then going and watching South Carolina practice. Like fall practice was open. You know, fall camp was literally open to fans. And there is none of that anymore. It's a shame. It's honestly a shame. Austin Gregory, he says, what was fan day? Let me tell you about a time. No, Austin, all it was, I mean, it was cool though. All it was, you went into like the indoor facility, or some teams do it at the stadium, or they had it at the Colonial Life Arena for a while. You go in there, there's tables set up, Austin, and you pick up a poster and you walk around and all the players and coaches and everybody signs the poster. It was a meet and greet basically. And so like offense would be sitting in a section, defense, special teams, coaches, whatever. And it was a free, open to the public meet and greet. They sign posters, maybe sign other things, whatever. Yeah, just a free meet and greet for the football team. I went to the one in 2019. I went to the last one in 19. And, it was a cool thing, cool experience. And, now with NIL, nobody's signing anything for free. That's for sure. Let's jump back to the phone lines
Call
here.
from
Justin, what's up, man? How are you?
How you doing, Chris?
I'm doing fantastic, my friend. Appreciate you asking. What's going on?
Hey, Chris, we're talking about the playoffs today. Hey, Chris, they talk about they might go to 60 teams. What are your thoughts on that?
They might go to 16 teams?
Mm-hmm.
My thoughts are we should see how 12 works out before we go to 16. That's what I'll say. Let's see how 12 works out.
Yeah, I agree, Chris. If they're about to try playoff, I think it's a good number to go to. Hey, Chris, if that was a playoff 2012, where would soccer be at today?
That's a good question, man. That's a good question. I mean, would it have changed the direction of the program all that much? I don't know. I mean, Steve Spurrier still wasn't recruiting all that much. I don't really know that. I don't really know that it would have changed much of anything. But hey, it would have put you in a position to go to your first playoff. So, I guess we'll never know.
Yeah, because it was 11-2 soccer back in the day, right, Chris? So, they finished number 4 in 2013. So that could have been a playoff team, right, Chris?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, South Carolina would have at least appeared in one playoff in that 3-year stretch.
Oh, yeah. And, Chris, who would have put me back there? Oregon, Florida State?
Yeah, you would have gotten Florida State 1 year, Oregon 1 year. Trying to think who else. Yeah, so those are the ones off the top of my head. But, yeah, it would have been fun to watch. But, unfortunately, it is what it is.
Yeah, that's true. Because imagine that you can maybe get Florida State right.
Yeah, I would have loved to have seen it. Yeah, Jameis Winston against Connor Shaw. That would have been fun.
Oh, yeah. I would love to see we get Jim Bishop back then, huh, Chris?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was Jimbo back then. So.
Yeah. Chris, a lot has changed, huh?
A lot has changed. Yes, that was 10 years ago, man. So lots have changed. And, I am excited as a Gamecock fan. Again, I know we've got some that are opposed to expansion in college football, the playoff, what have you. But, as a fan of South Carolina, I don't know how you can not love the expansion. I mean, your team now has a shot, which is the entire point of the college football playoff, is to feel like you give more teams a shot to win. And I just continuously go back to, it's so easy, I think, to sit here and say that, well, all of a sudden, that game's not going to matter. This game's not going to matter. Like, they all matter, man. In the moment, they all matter. Like, I think it's a fun thing to toss around and say, well, the games don't matter. This game doesn't matter. Like, bro, let's look at last year. Even if Tennessee, let's say it's a 12-team playoff, Tennessee still gets in the playoff. Does that make that win any less sweeter for South Carolina? Does it make the loss any less worse for Tennessee? I mean, that win is still incredible for South Carolina. Like, I just, let's say Clemson still got in the playoff. You're going to tell me that game doesn't matter anymore? Like, I just don't buy it. I don't buy the whole, well, the games aren't going to matter anymore. I don't buy it, man. I don't buy it for a second.
Yeah, I agree with you, Chris. I don't buy it neither. And think about Clemson. Let's say they got to the playoffs just because you had 2 losses. Why? Because Wednesday ACC champ, who they gonna face, Chris?
I don't know who they would have faced, honestly, but it's I think it'll make it more fun. I think more teams will be involved. I think there'll be more intriguing matchups. And, we'll probably get down to the same Final Four, Final Two, whatever, but at least it'll be some added entertainment on the path to doing so.
Oh, yeah. I agree, Chris. And, Chris, like you said, man, you hold the soccer. I think you did well. I hope we have a whole field advantage. That's what you want to do, right, Chris?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. You love to see players in campus, right, Chris?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'd love to see South come in the playoffs. So we'll see. We'll see. They got a chance.
Oh, yeah. Well, hey, Chris, all I said, man, go Gamecocks.
Justin,
to you.
Yeah, it's here, man. I appreciate you, Justin. Thank you so much for the call.
You ready?
Yeah, man. Take care. Go Cox. Great stuff as always from our friend Justin. And again, man, I get what people are saying that, well, the regular season doesn't mean everything anymore. Like, maybe it's kind of not a bad thing that one loss doesn't destroy your season. I mean, guys, I could tell you this, like the playoff last year, and I know Hendon Hooker got hurt, so maybe this doesn't apply, but like I would have much rather seen Tennessee in the playoff than TCU. I would have much rather seen it. I would have much rather seen Tennessee get another shot at Georgia than what TCU did. Absolutely. I would have much rather seen, I hate Clemson, but I'd have much rather seen Clemson from the entertainment perspective get a shot than TCU. I just, you can still be an elite team and lose one game. It happens. Maybe even two. So, anyways, that's where I fall. I'm excited. I'm excited to see what college football looks like with a 12-team playoff. I think it'll be really cool. And again, all of a sudden, South Carolina, you got a chance. You're going to start to see teams like Carolina, Ole Miss, Kentucky, maybe like a Missouri, God forbid. A Tennessee, an Auburn. You're going to start to see these teams, Texas A&M. You're going to start to see some new blood in a college ball playoff. And I think that'll be really good for the sport. Really good for the sport. Guys, we're about to hit 3 o'clock and appreciate you all tuning in. I want to say thank you to Chris Marler and Connor O'Gara for taking the time to chat on today's show. Be sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Hit that bell icon so you get notifications of when we go live and when we drop new video content. Also, hit the subscribe button on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. We're there, of course, under the Spurs Up Show. And check out the store, tsus.store, and or the spursupshow.com for the best Gamecocks merchandise on the internet. Guys, stay tuned for all the content. Again, appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and we will talk to you all tomorrow.